Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Corby Kummer. Federal employees got another email late Friday demanding that they list what they accomplished in the prior week. It's part of billionaire Elon Musk's push to find and stop what he claims are fraud and inefficiencies. But his math does not add up on the Doge website, and he's offered no evidence to support his claims. A week ago, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth instructed Pentagon workers to pause on their responses to the first email demand to discuss their work. He has since changed his mind.
I am now directing each member of the department's civilian workforce, just civilian, to provide those 5 bullets on what they accomplished in their specific jobs last week, to reply to that email and CC their immediate supervisors. It's a simple task.
He says not to put classified information in the emails. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is returning home after last Friday's testy visit to the White House. He had a more productive one yesterday in London. European leaders there said they would push for negotiations that would bring a lasting peace for Ukraine. NPR's Joanna Kakissis has more from Kyiv.
Ukrainians made TikTok videos and posted to social media to show their support for Zelensky. One prominent politician, Mustafa Nayyem, wrote on social media that the Trump administration hates Zelensky and Ukraine and sees Ukrainians as, quote, barriers to backroom deals. At the Kyiv food market, soldier Denis Sokolov says Zelensky wants what's best for Ukraine. Making peace versus making a deal, he says, are two different goals. Joanna Kakissis, NPR News, Kyiv.
Israel has blocked supplies and goods from entering Gaza. 2 million people there depend on that for survival. Israel's far-right government is seeking to pressure Hamas into a new ceasefire deal to release more Israeli hostages without ending the war, as Hamas demands. NPR's Aya Batrawi reports international relief groups are alarmed over Israel's decision to hold up aid.
Everything from medicine and tents for shelter to food and winter supplies are now blocked from Gaza. The Norwegian Refugee Council, which is responsible for bringing in tents to Gaza after more than 90% of all homes were destroyed, says humanitarian aid is a right, not a privilege. It called on Israel as the occupying power to reverse its decision. The aid agency Oxfam says Israel's blockade is a reckless act of collective punishment prohibited under international law. Doctors Without Borders notes that prices for basic goods and food has already spiked due to the uncertainty. The UN Humanitarian Relief Agency says international law is clear. Israel must ensure life-saving aid reaches people. Aya Batrawi, NPR News.
On Wall Street, stocks are lower. The Dow Jones Industrials are down more than 30 points. You're listening to NPR.
Good morning. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. Massachusetts Governor Maura Healey is non-committal on what new high school graduation requirements should look like. Voters last year removed a requirement that students pass a standardized test known as MCAS in order to receive their diplomas. Governor has established a council to come up with new guidelines, and during a visit to Holyoke Elementary School last week, Healey declined to say if she favored a certain method, but the governor says she wants consistency across the state.
I don't want a child in Holyoke treated differently from a child in Lowell, Massachusetts, or in Essex, Massachusetts. I want kids to have the same expectation. All of our kids deserve that.
The Graduation Council will include lawmakers, educators, and teachers' union officials. It's due to make its initial recommendations by December 1st. This week is Read Across America Week, and it's celebrated from March 2nd through the 6th. Now, why does it begin on March 2nd yesterday? Well, because that's the birthday of the late, great author Dr. Seuss, Theodore Geisel. It's a week when the National Education Association really encourages reading and educates people about its benefits, especially among children and young adults. The first Read Across America Week was launched in 1998 by the NEA, and events are organized across the nation by school and organizations to promote picking up a book. For instance, Boston Mayor Michelle Wu is right now reading to students at the Shaw Taylor Elementary School. In sports, exhibition baseball, Red Sox play the Orioles today, sunny and low 30s. We are at 24 degrees outside our studios here in Brighton. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Lilly Endowment, a private foundation supporting NPR's coverage of religion and spirituality, and Jarl and Pamela Mohn, focusing on civil liberties, foster youth, public radio, and the arts.
He's Jim Browdy. I am Marjorie Egan. You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH. We are streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Congressman Seth Moulton will join us, zooming in at about 11:35 on Ukraine and on Gaza and Israel. We'll be back at the Boston Public Library tomorrow and Wednesday. And on Wednesday, we're going to have special coverage of Mayor Wu's appearance before Congress in Washington. Plus, ask the Attorney General from 1 to 2. One last programming note, Jim. We're now just 7 days away from Jim forcing us all to talk about daylight saving time yet again. Hi, Jim.
No one is being forced. I would say Jim will allow us all to talk about daylight saving time. You're excused.
Excuse me,
no, it's fine.
my liege.
It's fine. It's really fine. While we were live on air Friday, Donald Trump threw out decades of international diplomacy in a meeting with Ukrainian President Zelensky in favor of, well, I guess this.
You don't have the cards right now. With us, you start having
I'm not playing cards.
Right now, you don't. Yeah, you're playing cards.
Mr. President.
You're playing
I'm
cards.
serious.
You're gambling with the
president
lives of millions of people.
You're
gambling with World War III. You're gambling with World War III. And what you're doing is very disrespectful to the country, this country. It's
with
back
all
to
respect
you.
to your
Far
country.
more than a lot of people said they
respect.
should have.
Have you said thank you once?
A lot of times.
No.
Okay, so today we're asking you about your thoughts on the past 72 hours in foreign policy for this country. And Russia State TV is very pleased, saying, quote, the new administration is rapidly changing all foreign policy configurations in a way that, quote, largely aligns with our, meaning Russia's vision. Give us a buzz or a text at 877-301-8970. Do you support this geopolitical shift aligning us closer to Russia and North Korea? And are you proud or depressed to see Europe filling the void in leadership led by our country? Or if you're a Trump supporter, is this exactly the kind of thing you voted for? Again, 877-301-8970. And as Marjorie said, Congressman Seth Moulton, who's been quite outspoken on this, will join us at the bottom of the hour. You know, we were half watching it because we were on the air when it was happening. I watched it, like I'm sure you did, many, many times over the weekend. One of the most embarrassing moments, I would argue, for America's leadership and this country that I can remember. Just incredible that he was treated like this by the Vice President and President of the United States.
It was, I mean, we switched teams is what it comes down to. Russia was our enemy for many, many years. Obviously, we worked with them in World War II, but we have been at odds all during the Cold War. Vladimir Putin is a horrible, horrible person who's killed and murdered and poisoned and shot his political enemies, who's imprisoned people that speak out, members of the press. I mean, he is a dictator. And to see our president so weak in front of the president of Russia was really, I mean, it was really disheartening.
You know, also, you know what's also disheartening? On one hand, over the weekend, you see European leaders meeting in London, embracing Zelensky and saying, we'll ask Moulton about this, the hope that the United States will get back in the game on the right side of this. At the same time, that people like Lindsey Graham, who used to be a strong supporter of funding and support for Ukraine, all of a sudden another puppet for Donald Trump, saying that Zelensky, the democratically elected president of Ukraine, should step down. Obviously, he said that to please Donald Trump. I mean, the behavior is just unbelievable.
It's
and
like
Mike Johnson himself,
who
before he was speaker, was also supportive of funding for Ukraine, also saying that he should step down, obviously simply to please Donald Trump. It was an incredible embarrassment. And this thank you crap from J.D. Vance. I mean, first of all, I'm sure you saw it over the weekend on cable news, the million thank yous that Zelensky has issued over the months and recent days, including in the Oval Office. But this demeaning, have you even thanked this country? Have you even thanked the president, it was galling from beginning to end. And I'm afraid we have a poll, a CBS poll, that thankfully ended before this meeting, the polling. I don't even want to see what people are going to say. I'm assuming 90% of Democrats think it was horrible and 90% of Republicans think it's beautiful. They were now working with Kim Jong-un and Vladimir Putin.
I don't know what's happened to the United States of America either. It's really kind of surprising. But you know what I loved? When Trump is saying, I made you a tough guy. And I'm thinking to myself, here was a guy that got 5 deferments from Vietnam. He's probably done nothing tough in his life except maybe bully people when he was in that military school in high school. And this is a man, Zelensky, who could have gotten out of his country very easily, left this whole mess to somebody else, rolled over to the Russians, and he stayed and fought this war and been on the front lines and gone to see amputees and dead soldiers and funerals for 3 years. I mean, it's just incredible that Donald Trump, who's like a bully, and bullies are usually wusses underneath the bullying, is accosting him in this way. And where does J.D. Vance get off? I mean,
well, he's another one. You know the line during the Kavanaugh hearings? I don't know if it was created then, but when he was nominated to be on the Supreme Court, and after his pathetic performance got even more pathetic when he was essentially screaming the next day. Remember what every commentator said? He was doing that for an audience of one. And that's what Vance was doing it for an audience of one.
Vance was just cozying up to the party in Germany with the Nazi sympathizers.
AfD, is that what it's called? Yeah.
Is this who we want? Are we going back? We're going to the communists in Russia and the Nazis in Germany? I don't know. This is the United States after all. So I'll shut up, but that's my horrified
By the way,
take.
And Rubio is another person who
he's
is
disgusting
now
too.
the Secretary of State. He obviously is supporting what Donald Trump did in the Oval Office. He was sitting there. You really couldn't see him to the left of Vance. He voted in favor of aid to Ukraine in 2022, but that was then and this is now.
You know, just one last thing. I mean, you can be concerned about the amount of money we've spent, by the way, which is not about the amount of money that the Europeans have spent, but we could be, Trump lies about that routinely, about the $350 billion. That's not true.
He was corrected by Macron the other day in the Oval Office.
It's something around half that, if that, and whether it's loans and grants and stuff. You can be upset about that with the problems we have in our own country. I get that. You could think that the Europeans should be spending more money, that they should be increasing their defense budgets, they're not depending on us so much. I get that. But this is something different. This is the president rolling over to Vladimir Putin, and I don't understand it.
877-301-8890. What was your take on Friday and what Friday means? I mean, it is sort of the ultimate shift moment, and I wasn't being facetious before, at least I believe it, to get much closer to people like countries like North Korea and Russia, and far further away from our allies for decades and decades and decades. Let's start with Lisa in Medford. Thank you so much for calling Boston Public Radio. Hi, Lisa.
Hi, Marjorie. Hi, Jim. Thanks for taking my call.
Thank you.
First, a quick zinger on Rubio. I've never seen a man get neutered on live television before, so no wonder he looked so grim while he was sitting there.
It was pathetic, yeah.
Yes, it was pretty pathetic. But, you know, this really breaks my heart, and I called in because I wanted to share. My dad and his wife, they served in the Navy, the American Navy for my dad, and the Canadian Navy for his wife for 30 and 35 years, respectively. And I've been talking to them all along, and, you know, they served in intelligence and spying areas and stuff like that. And I said, I can't get over this. And they said, you know, we just saw all of the work, all of the dedication, all of the time that we spent on submarines and out in the middle of the ocean and, you know, doing all these things to protect the United States, to protect Europe. It all went down the drain in these moments. And it's really, really heartbreaking that we still have active duty military out there that are going to have to suffer under the consequences of this new isolationist philosophy, I guess, or approach, or I don't even know. But this is just, it's an absolute embarrassment.
By the way, if I can interrupt, Lisa, it's far worse than isolationism. It's sidling up to a murderous dictator. I mean, it is appalling. And when you have Russia, state TV, as I read before, saying that essentially their foreign policy, the United States, largely aligns with our vision, and you don't have a nanosecond later a president of the United States saying that's not true. He was probably thrilled to get praised by Putin. It's horrible. Lisa, I'm really glad you shared that story, and
we should
call
point
us again.
This
Thank
out.
you.
That Zelensky wants security guarantees for the United States because, of course, they rolled into Ukraine in 2014 when Obama was president. A lot of people think Obama really screwed up on handling that situation. And then they've ignored all these other signed agreements. So what Zelensky needs, because what good is this if it just is going to enable Russia to keep
That's what he said.
taking their land?
His whole thing...
Yeah.
His whole thing in the Oval Office was, I think it was directed at Vance, why do you believe that anything they sign will ever be honored?
Right.
And he started going down a list of commitments they, being Russia, has dishonored, but obviously they didn't want to hear that because bullies don't want to hear that. Jane in Concord, hi.
Hi, guys.
Hi.
Got a long list of comments and questions today for you.
Go ahead.
So if Biden said any of the things Trump is saying, wouldn't everyone be talking about his age and that he has dementia and that sort of thing? When Trump says that Zelensky's a dictator and then he's asked the next day about it and he says, did I say that? And if Biden had an advisor like Musk, would anyone tolerate that? And Trump loved to talk about the hostages who pled guilty to the insurrection on January 6th. But what about like 20,000 kids who were kidnapped from Ukraine into Russia in forced adoptions? And I looked it up online yesterday, and there was some reference to hundreds of thousands of people brought into Russia, but I don't know if that was accurate. That was on Wikipedia. And, just it goes on and on and on with the craziness. He also seems to think he's back at this casino days. He's talking about gambling. You don't have the cards. You're not making a deal. It's all like talk about his gambling and his performance with he's like the circus master or something like that. He doesn't realize he's the president, I think.
Well, Jane, another unhappy American. Jane, thank you for the call. I ordinarily, if it were not somebody who had this kind of credibility, when Jane said, I don't know what caused this or some such thing. Did you hear what James Carville had to say over the weekend?
What?
On his YouTube channel, he said, I was
No.
about to talk about, it came out Friday night or Friday afternoon after the meeting. It was, he said, I was about to talk about something else, but I can't talk about something else with this happening. This is Carville. I'm not subscribing to this, but this is a pretty important political analyst in American history. He was suggesting, he says, I'm no doctor. He said, but some people are saying that this is a result of Trump having syphilis. You didn't hear this? I mean,
and I've heard the syphilis things many times because he had the bruise on his hand or something.
This is James Carville doing a 10-minute thing suggesting, again.
Well, I have no idea.
Well, nor do I, and but he's not a non-player.
A lot of our texters are saying that they think that that Putin has something on Trump. That's been a guess for a long time, that he's a Russian asset, willing or unwillingly. One texter thinks that Putin told Trump to keep his hands off Putin's off Zelensky's rare minerals. I hadn't heard that theory before. But it's the same thing that for some reason Trump has warmed up to Putin since was in office the first time, but he warms up to dictators in general. So you know what I mean? It's maybe more with Putin, but he seems to like them all.
One of the other sad things, because I'm a great admirer of Zelensky too, as I'm guessing most of our audience is, did you see that he either tweeted or put out a statement somewhere thanking the United States and the president after the fact? Because sadly, despite having near unanimous support in Europe, he still needs the United States to be part of the mix here.
Yeah. Unless the Europeans and they don't have the weaponry that we have, and we've knocked off the weaponry. They're facing continued slaughter. Isn't that what he's facing?
I don't know. We'll ask
home?
Seth Moulton that, and at the bottom of the hour, where do you want to go next, Marjorie?
Rich in Worcester, thank you for calling.
Hello, Rich.
Yeah, hi, Jim and Marjorie. I have an alternative view, and you both are incredibly intelligent people, and I just can't believe that the propaganda. I sent an article which I hope you read and post on your website.
What is it?
The history of this conflict is being taken totally out of context, and there's lying on both sides. It's just so sad.
Well, tell us what the lying is.
What's Zelensky's lie?
There's plenty of lying.
Well, let's have
like
them.
what?
This whole conflict. Let's go back to 2014. The CIA orchestrated the coup, overthrow a democratically elected president sympathetic to Russia.
Yeah.
That's a fact. He flees. All right.
When you say, Rich, if I may, when you say it's a fact, what's your source, if we may ask?
It's just so. Well, I'll tell you the source. There was a telephone conversation between Victoria Nuland, who was the
Hey, Rich, I have no idea what you're talking about.
We're getting too far in the weeds.
Rich, if you want,
the general consensus is that this was Putin wants to recapture the glory of the USSR, and he's been very upset since it fell about its diminution, and he wants to add on other countries and add on other land. Now, if there's some alternative view to that from a legitimate source, but I think you're a little bit too far in the weeds here. I mean, is there a big picture thing you want to mention about 2025?
Marjorie, and I'll shut up, but just Google Jeffrey Sachs. He's probably the most brilliant foreign policy analyst in the country.
We'll Google him. Rich, why don't you send us what you'd like us to read, and we will read it, we promise. Rich, thanks for the call. 877-301-8970 is the number.
Okay,
Lauren,
my anxiety, here's one. My anxiety is out of control and my depression is setting in. All I can do to comfort myself is knowing that I'm on the right side of history and will not be complicit.
I don't know how it's comforting. Comforting to that texter. We're a little more than a month into the month and 2 weeks to the Trump presidency, and I don't. Again, we'll ask Malta. I don't know how you heal, assuming that our relations last for 3 years and 10 and a half more months. These are our allies. And he really, I know it's not an original thought. He treats enemies like allies, and he treats allies like enemies. It's just, what are you laughing about?
Here's sort of a dark humor joke about, Elon Musk with his text 5 things you've done last week. No more aid to Ukraine until President Zelensky emails 5 things he's thankful to Trump for. And the email goes on, the texter, I should say, that Trump and Vance are a disgrace.
Well, so if you want to have a little humor, Marjorie, we all remember when Keir Starmer, the new Prime Minister of the UK, was there last week after Macron from France had been there, and he was very proud because he knows he knows what makes Donald Trump tick. He brought this handwritten letter from King Charles inviting him for a second state visit. They talked about this for a while because, again, Starmer knew how valuable it would be. King Charles is inviting him, etc. Borowitz this morning had a headline. Andy Borowitz, our friend, the satirist. King Charles downgrades Trump's state visit to lunch with Prince Andrew. And if you don't know anything about Prince Andrew, Google it. He's sort of on the outs because of his Jeffrey Epstein connections over there.
A lot of our texters are buying the line that Zelensky doesn't want. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have interrupted you.
No, it's fine.
Zelensky doesn't want peace, and why is it bad to start negotiations to end the war? I've gotten several of these. And the issue is they needed security. They needed some security reassurances because Putin would just, they believe, with history on their side, would just roll over them once again, and that was the sticking point.
What does it mean? I understand that's the line. He doesn't want peace. That's what Trump said.
That's what Trump said.
So that's what you're supposed to say if you support the other side in this. What is that? Could you explain what that means in the minds of those who say it?
It's with all due respect to the texters, it's ridiculous. Of course he wants peace. His countrymen are and children are slaughtered, and 20,000 kidnapped, as the previous caller just said. Of course he wants peace.
He wants peace. He doesn't want capitulation.
Right, and that's what Trump is. There's no capitulation on the side of Russia. Trump is happy to negotiate a peace where Russia gets everything and
you don't mean capitulation, you mean compromise. There's nothing from Russia. He's given away the store. That's correct.
That's right. He's given away the store to Vladimir Putin. And I don't know. I don't know why Americans think that's a good idea. Russia's been our enemy for quite some time.
Why do you think Republicans think it's a good idea?
Because
when Putin
they have
has been the Antichrist forever.
They are just crawling on hands and knees, as Senator Whitehouse says from Rhode Island. They're just I don't know how these guys' wives can look at them the next day.
How about their kids?
Would you want anything to do? Well, the kids could be brainwashed or something.
You see who broke with him? Murkowski, by the way, from Alaska, put out a really good statement about this.
A woman.
I knew you'd say that. It's true. We got to take a break, Marjorie.
Okay, we got to take a break. We're talking about what most of us are calling a total disgrace by Donald Trump and J.D. Vance in the Oval Office on Friday. What you make of it? 877-301-8970 is the number to call or text.
Persian rugs serve a practical purpose. They are useful floor coverings and, of course, pretty. Iran's tradition of intricate hand-woven rugs runs deep.
They're not just rugs, they carry huge references to cultural history.
Meet the father-daughter duo sharing that history with the world through their carpet business on The World.
This afternoon at 3, here on GBH News 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you. And Bridgewater State University, helping create jobs for Massachusetts. BSU's skilled graduates are recruited by today's industry leaders, elevating business in Boston and beyond. bridgew.edu/elevate. And Boston Lyric Opera, presenting The Seasons, a new opera inspired by the music of Vivaldi's The Four Seasons, with an original libretto by playwright Sarah Rule, playing March 12th through 16th at the Emerson Paramount Center. Tickets at blo.org.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Marjorie and Jim Browdy. We're streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Congressman Seth Moulton will zoom in about 5, 6, 7 minutes. We're back at the library tomorrow. On Wednesday, we're also at the library. We'll bring you coverage of Mayor Wu's performance, testimony, appearance before the House of Representatives, and the Attorney General, Andrea Campbell, will join us from 1 to 2. If you're just joining us, we're talking about what happened in the Oval Office on Friday with Zelensky, Trump, and Vance, and the fallout. And you can call us and weigh in at 877-301-8970.
I would say the overwhelming response from the texters is humiliated, embarrassed, sick to their stomachs, disgusted. Here's one that stands out. Putin is not able to conquer Ukraine after 3 years of battle, but Putin has now conquered America without firing a bullet.
Beautifully put. Let's go to Mim in Lowell. You're next on Boston Public Radio. Hi.
Hi. I am, oh my God, I've got so much to say, and I'm so exercised and upset. But I think if you step back and look at the big picture, America first means we are resigning from world leadership. Look at what we've done with USDA. Look at the vote in the UN, and just totally embarrassing and I don't even have words. Performance on Friday, and we're not a reliable ally. We don't understand what friendship is, and we're just stepping back. You know, why would anyone make an agreement or a pact or a treaty with us if you don't know it's going to outlast the administration? So we're no longer the world leader, and it's going to take a long time to get that back, if we ever do.
Well, you said it quite well, Mim. Thanks for the call.
That was a great call, and it reminds me of the prospect of the Europeans now sharing sensitive intelligence with Tulsi Gabbard, who many people already think is a Russian asset. So you get her doing intelligence, and then you get Trump, whom other people think is a Russian asset. I don't know. Where does that put, like, the Brits and France?
I mean, there is the separation between our allies, as you've said repeatedly, for decades and decades and decades is just, it's appalling. And remember, this was the same week where we voted at the UN with North Korea, Russia. Was Iran part of that vote, I think, as well? The United States, we sided with North Korea and Russia and not with our allies. Pretty significant kind of moment. Again, Seth Moulton will join us in a couple of minutes. Our number is 877-301-8970. Where are we going next there, please? Thank you. Let's go to Carol in Framingham.
In Framingham.
Hey,
Thank
Carol.
you for calling.
Hi.
Hi, long-time listener, first-time caller.
Thank you for both. We appreciate it.
I'm calling to say that I think what happened with Zelensky is shameful. I think he showed great restraint. But on a bigger note, I mean, there's just so much, something every day. It's all the cabinet appointments. It's Elon Musk not following the law. It's just all of it. And I think as citizens, we feel at a loss as to what we can do, and also and what's going to happen if Elon Musk and Trump decide not to follow the law, like they're doing now with all of the aid that's supposed to be released. So for me, I guess what makes me feel better is finding ways to participate in the government as a citizen. I recommend that everybody listen to Heather Cox Richardson's interview with Anthony Blinken about what they've done in diplomacy. And his take is the biggest thing you can do is be a citizen. So, like, for instance, taking part in the phone banks to make sure that the Supreme Court candidate Susan Crawford retains her seat in Wisconsin, or the Florida races for the congressional districts to replace Matt Gaetz and forget the other woman's name who's running, and then it'll be Marco Rubio. So, I mean, by participating in these things, it at least makes me feel like, well, here's something I can do. It's not going to change the world, but I think it's all we can do is find ways as individuals, however small they are, because it's a collective effort that's going to make a difference. No one person can do it on their own.
Carol, those are wonderful sentiments. I hope people take your thoughts to heart, because at least what we've seen for the most part is an American people who have practically surrendered. I mean, tweeting is essentially our form of resistance, which is just pathetic in the face of all this. But I hope people take what you have to say seriously and act. Thanks for your recommendation. We should take a break, Marjorie.
One of the other theories besides the Russian asset theory, it's all about money. He can make a lot more money latching on to Putin than he can latching on to Ukraine.
Well, it's like we're going to talk to Seth Moulton also about what's happening in Gaza. How about, did you remember that video that I can't believe he forwarded this thing, this Trump Gaza that ends with him and Netanyahu in their bathing suits lying. It is impossible to explain. Thank you for your calls.
Oh, I must say there was some great AI stuff, too, of Zelensky and Trump in the office over the weekend. There's a fun use of VA, if you like, AI, rather, if you like watching brawls. Anyway, we're out of time. Coming up after a quick break, we're going to talk with Massachusetts Congressman Seth Moulton on Russia and Ukraine, the meltdown there, on Israel and Gaza, on the politicization of the military, and Democrats kind of out in the wilderness, not really getting the picture at the moment. Listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
I'm Jared Bowen. Today on The Culture Show, former NATO Supreme Allied Commander Admiral James Stavridis. He has a lot to say about America's current positioning in global affairs. As an historian, he has a perspective on how our current geopolitical reality compares to other tumultuous times, and he offers cautionary tales in his novels, all unfolding in several best-selling works of fiction. Tune in for that, plus an Oscars recap with movie maven Joyce Kulhawick. That and more on The Culture Show today at 2 on 89.7 GBH.
Support for GBH comes from you.
And GM Roth Design Remodeling. Dreams delivered. With custom kitchens, bathrooms, and additions. Serving New England for over 39 years. Learn more at gmroth.com. And Emerson Colonial Theater, with a Broadway production of Jason Robert Brown and Alfred Urey's musical Parade, coming to Boston for 2 weeks, this March 11th through March 23rd. Tickets at emersoncolonialtheater.com.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Marjorie Egan and Jim Bradley. We're streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Back at the Boston Public Library tomorrow, CNN's John King will zoom in, and an employee from the VA who was fired by Elon Musk's Doge. Then on Wednesday, we'll also be at the library. We'll bring you special coverage of Mayor Wu testifying before Congress, and the Attorney General, Andrea Campbell, will join us 1 to 2 for Ask the AG. Friday's meeting between Trump, Zelensky, and Vance was established to finalize details of a minerals deal before it exploded into this bullying of the Ukrainian president and potentially a massive geopolitical shift in foreign policy. Here's a little more from Friday. This between Vance and President Zelensky.
I'm talking about the kind of diplomacy that's going to end the destruction of your country.
Yes, but if you are not strong...
Mr. President, with respect, I think it's disrespectful for you to come into the Oval Office and try to litigate this in front of the American media. Right now, you guys are going around and forcing conscripts to the front lines because you have manpower problems. You should be thanking the President for trying to bring an end to this conflict.
Have you ever been to Ukraine that you say what problems we have?
I have been to.
Come once.
I've actually watched and seen the stories.
That was immense. I've actually watched and seen the stories. Massachusetts congressman has done more than watched and seen the stories. Seth Moulton.
I visited on Google Maps.
Exactly. Seth Moulton is joining us now on Zoom. Congressman Moulton represents the 6th District. As you know, he served 4 tours of duty in Iraq as a Marine congressman. Good to see you. Thanks for zooming in.
Always good to be here. Thanks for having me.
So, Congressman, you reacted very strongly shortly after the blowout in the Oval Office on Friday. But for people that don't know, what'd you make of it?
I thought it was a meeting between two total cowards who are puppets of Vladimir Putin. I mean, you can argue whether or not Vance is a puppet of Trump or a puppet of Putin, but you get the point. A meeting between two cowards and a true hero. And it's just so sad and embarrassing as a fellow American that the cowards are our president and vice president of the United States, completely unwilling to stand up to a murderous dictator, completely willing to sell out an ally, and just completely devoid of American values. And it was the Ukrainian who is the hero.
Can the Europeans, I mean, we've all seen the meetings, images from the meetings with European leaders, plus Trudeau from Canada, embracing literally and figuratively Zelensky after he left Washington. Can the Europeans pull this off alone, or does the United States need to be drawn back into this, Seth Moulton?
I mean, it's going to be really hard, and that's why it's so dangerous for our national security. This isn't just about a principled case of our values, about standing up for freedom and democracy, about protecting liberty around the globe. This is about our national security. This is about the fact that Putin will clearly go somewhere next, and it's probably going to be a NATO country where we have American troops stationed, so American kids will start dying. This is about the message that it sends to all of our allies and all of our adversaries all over the world. The happiest observer of this is Xi Jinping in China, who wants to take over Taiwan. And only our deterrence, only the threat of America stopping that is what is preventing World War III. That's not an exaggeration. That is not an exaggeration.
So how emboldened do you think he is by Trump's abandonment of Ukraine, Congressman?
Tremendously. And every national security advisor, expert or whatever I talk to on both sides of the aisle is very concerned about this. I know that people in the White House, like Mike Waltz, are very concerned about what happens over in Taiwan. And I visited Taiwan with Mike Waltz just a couple years ago. And he's very concerned about the message that this sends to Xi Jinping. You won't hear him say that, I'm sure, but that is absolutely on his mind. It's on the minds of every American who's just trying to prevent outbreaks of violence around the world that are currently stopped by the threat of American deterrence. And that's just crumbling.
You know, can I just ask one more question?
Sure.
You serve with Walz, obviously, in Congress. When you see the National Security Advisor to the President too scared to answer a question about his position in the past on these issues, literally dancing at full speed for fear that he'll upset his boss with honesty, even if he went on to say, well, President Trump has convinced me that I should change my position. Can't even say that. What does that do to you when you know this human being as a colleague prior to service for Trump?
It makes me say, stop being a coward. That's why I use that word. Let's just be honest here. Let's be honest about what's going on. I don't know what Trump's relationship is with Putin, but he's clearly afraid of him. And Vance is clearly afraid of Trump. And all of these Republicans are just scared to death of Trump getting involved in their elections and making them lose their jobs or something. I mean, I don't know. I sat at the Munich Security Conference with Lindsey Graham and this whole delegation of Republicans as we met with European allies, as we met with Zelensky. Their story was entirely different. We were all united, Democrats and Republicans, saying, yes, we're going to stand with our allies. Of course we will. The allies that generations of Americans have fought to build, starting most recently with the greatest generation in World War II. All of our European allies are at our side because of the sacrifice of millions of the greatest generation. And yet all of a sudden, what happens? Trump does something that every Republican with an ounce of intelligence or morality disagrees with, and they're just silent until about 2 hours later, and then they come up with these wild stories to somehow justify what's going on. I actually checked. For Marco Rubio, it was like an hour and 40 minutes between sitting on the couch in horror, unable to sit up, shrinking from the scene until he sends out this tweet that criticizes Zelensky for being disrespectful. You know, he's not wearing a suit or whatever, like blinders on the next time Elon Musk stands behind the Resolute desk in a black t-shirt. I mean, it's just so utterly hypocritical. I don't mind having disagreements. Mike Wallace and I can have great debates and disagreements, or at least we could in the past, but be honest. Like, how hard is it to just be honest?
By the way, you said, when you're talking about silence, Lindsey Graham wasn't silent. Lindsey Graham went on to say over the weekend Zelensky should resign, as did the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson.
Yeah. So coming out of, just 2 weeks ago, like I said, I was with Lindsey Graham at Munich. My story hasn't changed. I'm still saying the exact same things. It's the Republicans who change the script whenever Trump does something that, forces, or they somehow believe forces them to support him. I mean, just be honest.
Talking to Congressman Seth Moulton.
Is there any fixing this? I mean, can something happen better, or is this just going to be Russia running roughshod? Or, I mean, can Europeans really get up to speed this fast?
I was speaking up in Haverhill this morning to the Merrimack Valley Chamber of Commerce, and I used an old John McCain quote. This is the senator, of course, whom the draft dodger in chief attacked for being a POW in Vietnam.
Right.
And he said with a sly smile, he said, it's always darkest right before it's pitch black.
Now, good. That's good.
I don't mean to come across as a pessimist, but look, if I'm going to be honest too, I honestly think this is going to get worse before it gets better. And I don't see it turning around under this administration. I think our allies across the globe are questioning our commitment and will continue to question it until Donald Trump is out of the Oval Office. And God knows what our adversaries are doing. I mean, I'm so thankful that we killed Osama bin Laden before Trump came into the Oval Office, because he and Vance would probably be making friends with him now.
So what do you fear? What is the pitch black that you fear? This is, it's hard to believe. We're only a month and a half into the second term of Donald Trump. If the Constitution holds, we have 46 and a half months left, maybe more, depending on what he does. What's next that you fear most, Seth Moulton?
Look, everyone is, of course, focused on the very legitimate domestic threats to our government, to our democracy, to the just shredding the Constitution that's going on with Musk and Trump and everything else. But I think that the most serious, the most existential threats with this administration are the international ones, because here are a few scenarios that are just totally realistic. Putin gets the message that he can not only trounce Ukraine, but he's going to keep going. And he starts to take some of our Eastern European allies, small countries that are NATO allies, where we have U.S. troops, and Americans start dying. And that could literally escalate to a nuclear exchange. That is our deal, by the way. For 70 years, it has been, if Russia invades, we will use nukes against you. So that's why you won't do it, Russia. So that could be very bad. If Xi Jinping invades Taiwan, we might not even have a choice. A lot of the war gamers have him first taking out our satellites. So whether you believe in defending Taiwan or not, they might make the first moves against the stuff that you use on Google Maps to get home on your GPS. If he takes that out, are we going to really not respond? That's why a war over Taiwan could so quickly escalate into literally a world war. That is not an exaggeration. And then you talk to anyone serious about national security on either side of the aisle, and they'll tell you that. So those are just two things that could happen. as a result of what they did in the Oval Office.
Well, let's add one more foreign policy nightmare to the situation. Israel deciding at the end of round one of their ceasefire to cut off humanitarian aid to Gaza and the 2 million people there. And experts say it's a violation of international law, but Netanyahu doesn't seem to care about that. What happens there?
Thousands of people die, including a lot of innocent kids, because they're the ones who can't literally fight for food. You cut off food from a place like Gaza. Who do you think's gonna eat first? The guys with the guns. When people become desperate, it's the guys with the guns that get the food. It's the women and children who suffer and die. But you want to talk about the Middle East? What if Trump says, "Hey, go ahead, Netanyahu, just take out Iran's nuclear program"? That might sound great in the short term. But if Iran's response is within a couple years just to rebuild a nuclear program and not stop before they get to a bomb, because they realize now, okay, well, we got to have a nuke because that's the only deterrent that's going to work, then what's going to be the response of all the other nations in the Middle East? You're going to set off a nuclear arms race in the Middle East, and all of a sudden you're going to go from one country being on the verge of having a nuclear weapon to a dozen countries having them aimed at each other. I mean, this is just very, very dangerous stuff. If there's anyone out there to whom I sound alarmist, I mean, I'm sorry, but this is reality here, and this is why it's not just about whether you like Zelensky or not, or whether you voted for Trump. This is about our national security. That's not a partisan issue. It's about keeping America safe.
Congressman, you went to Harvard, and Harvard, like a lot of other colleges, has been really tough on any kind of pro-Palestinian demonstration. We had a film last night when the Oscar for Best Documentary Foreign Film, No Other Land, about Israel bulldozing parts of the West Bank, couldn't even find an American distributor. For people that are upset about what's going on in Gaza and this withholding of food, and by the way, last night the filmmakers also mentioned the hostages having to come back, in their acceptance. But what are people supposed to do? Like people that went to your college that are upset, how do they show their upsetness when they can't have peaceful protests anymore in the United States of America?
Well, actually, I mean, look, I actually think Harvard, after going through some really tough times under the new president, has actually set out a very clear policy, which says you can protest, but you're not going to disrupt other people from going to school, and you're not going to attack people simply because of their faith. So you don't get to attack Jewish students just because you disagree with what Israel is doing. So I think that's quite reasonable. But I think the broader threat is that Trump is just saying nationally, you got to agree with me or we're going to come after you. Yeah. So like they're attacking colleagues of mine for just posting legitimate guidance about how to deal with ICE raids. They're saying that you can't even talk about diversity. I remember sitting on the Armed Services Committee when Republicans tried to ban books from West Point because they disagreed with their perspective on race. I'm sorry, but America doesn't ban books. That's what they do in China. That's what they do in Russia. That's what they did in Nazi Germany. If you're too afraid to just have a debate, then that's a real problem. Don't forget my battle with the Democratic Party a couple months ago. We couldn't even debate contentious issues. So I'm all pro-debate. I'm saying take it on. But the message you're getting from conservatives right now who follow Trump is no, you're not allowed to talk about certain things.
By the way, you forgot they're banning books in Florida, too. You went overseas. You can come back here and do it. We're talking to Seth Moulton. Congressman, you going to it's not the State of the Union. You going to Trump's speech to a joint session in Congress tomorrow night?
Yes, look, I think it's important to show up.
Who you bringing?
Now, I don't know how long I'll last.
Who you bringing?
It's important to show up.
Who's your guest?
I'm not subjecting anyone to that misery.
Okay. One last.
Okay.
Well, not one last. You also wrote a piece, another troubling aspect of all of these 180s. Trump's military purge threatens democracy. This came right after him dumping the chair of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. What did you say there, Congressman?
I said that when you politicize the military, it's very dangerous for democracy, because the end result is that if the military is on the side of one political party and not the other, then you can't have these debates. You get afraid to run against the other party. I mean, that's what dictatorships are all about. That's what happens in Orban's Hungary. That's what happens in Vladimir Putin's Russia, right? What happens if you run against Vladimir Putin? You end up in a Siberian prison, and one day you show up dead, right? So that's the path that we're headed on if you politicize the military. That's why it's so dangerous. That's why the founders worked so hard to ensure that the military would not be politicized, putting funding with Congress, actually forbidding a standing army when this country got started. They were very conscious of this risk. Trump doesn't care. Musk doesn't care. And so he fired people with no justification whatsoever. Some Republicans said, oh, well, wait, this is no different than Truman firing MacArthur. Oh, no. MacArthur was insubordinate. That's why he got fired. That's very clear. That's civilian control of the military. But I sent a letter, a bipartisan letter, by the way. Not an easy thing to get a Republican to sign on to this, but a bipartisan letter to Secretary Hegseth saying, why are you firing these people? Unsurprisingly, he has not been able to answer the question.
Well, he wanted to fire
couldn't answer.
He wanted to fire the Joint Chiefs head, CQ Brown. He talked about that before he became the head of the Pentagon. What do you think about that firing?
I've never done this
second
before.
black man, by the way, to be the.
But that's not the
Joint Chiefs
point.
head.
But that's not the point. See, that's playing into Republicans when you say, "Oh, it's all about what his race was." That's absolutely not the point. I hate it when Democrats bring this up because that just plays into the argument that we're just promoting people because we want to have someone be the second black person be the chairman of the Joint Chiefs. Look, I wrote a letter to President Biden. I've never done this before, but I wrote a letter to President Biden when he was considering who should be the next chairman. And I said, I think this Air Force General, CQ Brown, is the best choice you could make because he's extraordinary. He's unbelievably smart. He's unbelievably focused on modernization, which has been my mantra with the Department of Defense for 10 years now. And he's willing to have the courage to go against the institution to get it done. And that's really hard to find in today's military. So I thought he was so exceptional that I went to the effort to write a letter. By the way, I didn't mention anything about his race. I just said he is the most qualified person for this job. That's how good CQ Brown is. That's how good he is. And that's why it's such a loss that they fired him because they want to make a point. I mean, frankly, his firing is racist, right? That's what they're doing. But that's not why he got the job.
Oh, I don't think Marjorie was suggesting it's why he got the job. It's what you just said.
I don't mean to be so hard on you, Marjorie.
No, it's fine. You can be as hard as you want. Okay. But it's part of the animus is he happens to be black, and he obviously was very supportive of Black Lives Matter after the murder of George Floyd. You know, before you go, Congressman, you mentioned, and we had you on, Ray, after you made the remarks about trans athletes, and we were critical too, and you took a lot of heat from some, a lot of support from others. Today, though, a month or so later, Trump's rating in the CBS News polls, 51% approval, while at the same time, 73% of Democrats say they're unhappy with how their own party has responded to Donald Trump. What's the elixir? What's the fix for the Democrats, or is there one?
You got to do a couple of things, and I'm trying to do both. One is stand up forcefully to Trump. You know, that's why I'm not afraid to get on TV and call Trump and Vance out for what they are, cowards, as they sat with Zelensky. But it also means we've got to be willing to reform our own party, because somehow we lost touch with the majority of Americans. That's by definition what happened in this election, that we lost. And when Democrats say, oh, well, we only lost by a little, look, they're just making a really pathetic excuse for not changing. Because if you lose by a little to the first convicted felon ever to run for president, you got big problems. We should have cleaned up in this election across the board, from school board to president of the United States. Every Democrat in the land should have run because of how evil Trump is. And yet we didn't. So we've got to make some changes. And first and foremost, in my mind, is just being willing to take on contentious issues. Like, not deny that there's a problem at the southern border, not deny that we have inflation, not deny that we should be able to have a debate about whether trans women should play on girls' sports teams. Like, just have that debate. That's all I'm saying. I didn't even presuppose what the answer is. Just have that debate. And yet we seem unwilling to do that. And that's why so many Americans just shake their heads and say, you know, Democrats, like, you're just so out of touch. Like, get real. get real. And by the way, when we're willing to engage on those issues, it's also really helpful to the people Trump is going to attack. Because if we don't have a more reasonable immigration policy, then his extremist policies win the day. If we don't have a more reasonable policy with regards to trans people, then his policy, his extremist policy, just wins the day because we're not even allowed to have a response.
But Congressman, you had a more reasonable immigration policy. Some thought even draconian that President Biden supported before the election, and Donald Trump, candidate Trump, scared Republicans into opposing that which they had supported. So at the end of the day, aren't they willing to fight Republicans in a totally different winning way from how Democrats are? I mean, look at McConnell retiring changed this country probably for half a century because he was willing to play by no rules when it comes to Supreme Court nominations. Don't Democrats have to fight in the same sort of way, not just have the courage to debate these issues, as you said, but they've got to be willing to take off the gloves, literally or figuratively.
I agree with you. I certainly took off the gloves on CNN when I went after Trump and Vance. And I was just being honest, but it was doing so in a very direct way. And I do think that Democrats need to do that more across the board because you're right. I mean, Republicans show up to a knife fight with machine guns, and we've got to be able to match that.
Chainsaws,
or chainsaws.
yeah.
So what do you think about Hakeem Jeffrey's leadership of the House of Representatives?
I think Hakeem is great. I've always thought he's great. Our caucus has not been more united, but the problem is that if you want him to be an out front leader for the party, then he's going to lose some of the consensus that he's gotten by leading the House of Representatives in a very collaborative way. So I just think that he's not trying to be the out front leader that some people want him to be. He's actually trying to be an effective leader behind the scenes, and he's doing brilliantly at that. So let's keep him doing that, and not say, hey, go out and say, more contentious things like Seth Moulton is saying and risk, alienating some of the far left.
But he's the highest ranking Democrat in America, and I can't list for you one thing he has said. I'm sure that I've missed something. I can't list for you one thing he said critical of Trump's policies. Isn't that a problem?
Well, look, I don't agree with that, but I will just tell you, behind the scenes, it's really significant that our caucus is so united. Like, that makes a huge difference when we have a very, very narrow margin in the House of Representatives. And they're not united out of fear of retribution, as under previous leaders. They're united out of real consensus that we like the person who represents us. That's a powerful thing that I don't want to give up.
Congressman, we really appreciate your time, as always. Hope to talk to you again soon.
Always good to see you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Congressman. We have been speaking with Massachusetts Congressman Seth Moulton, who represents the 6th District. And the Congressman, as people know, knows a lot about the military because he served 4 tours in Iraq as a Marine. Coming up after the new news, food policy analyst Atlantic's Corby Kummer on the price of eggs. Price gouging, or is it just all bird flu? You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
It's not over yet. More smart conversation about community issues is up ahead with Jim Braude and Marjorie Egan on Boston Public Radio. Right after a news update from NPR. Stay with us here on GBH 89.7.
Funding for our programs comes from you.
And the Skating Club of Boston, presenting the ISU World Figure Skating Championships with over 300 athletes competing at TD Garden March 25th through 30th for the title of World Champion. Tickets at isuworlds2025.com. Every story has its twists and turns, so let the PBS NewsHour set the record straight. Get the facts you need from America's most trusted news source. Don't miss the PBS NewsHour weeknights at 6 on GBH2.
You're listening to 89.7 WGBH HD1 Boston. Online at gbhnews.org. GBH News. what matters to you.
I'm Jim Browdy, head on Hour 2 of Boston Public Radio. We'll start the noon hour with Food Authority Corby Kummer. The Seafood Shack Sullivan's on Castle Island just took
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Nora Rahm. President Trump is set to deliver an address to a joint session of Congress tomorrow night, but a new NPR-PBS Marist poll finds Americans are against many of the things that Trump is trying to do. NPR's Domenica Montanaro has more.
President Trump has claimed a mandate several times since being elected and has tried to do a lot in the little more than a month since he was sworn in. But a majority of the nearly 1,700 respondents in the survey said they think Trump is moving too quickly and not considering the consequences of what he's doing in trying to reshape the government. Trump gets a 45% approval rating and just 34% from independents. When it comes to DOGE, the informal Department of Government Efficiency, headed by Elon Musk, just 39% have a favorable opinion. It raises the stakes for Trump's speech tomorrow, but it also could be a warning sign for next year's midterm elections for Republicans, especially if independents continue to say they oppose what Trump is doing. Domenico Montanaro, NPR News, Washington.
The Kremlin is offering its first comments on last week's blow-up between President Trump and Ukrainian leader Volodymyr Zelensky in the Oval Office. NPR's Charles Maines has details.
Speaking to reporters, Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said the incident between Trump and Zelensky displayed the fragmentation of the West towards Russia, with the U.S. pursuing a policy of peace and Europe still intent on war. The spokesman also noted that Russian President Vladimir Putin was, of course, familiar with the event in the Oval Office and said it proved Putin correct in blaming Kiev for the lack of a negotiated settlement to end the war. Zelensky doesn't want peace, claimed Peskov, calling on others to force a change in the Ukrainian leader's position. Left unspoken, Moscow's position for a negotiated settlement involves Ukraine capitulating on nearly all of Russia's terms. Charles Maines, NPR News.
German authorities say one person was killed and others injured when a car rammed into a crowd of people today in the city of Mannheim. NPR's Rob Schmitz reports.
A police spokesman said that the driver plowed into a group of people in a pedestrian street in Mannheim city center. Police say they've arrested one suspect and can't give information on whether there were other perpetrators. Across Germany, many people have taken a long weekend off to celebrate Carnival. The holiday is taking place under increased police presence after Islamic State called on its followers to carry out attacks during the celebrations. Authorities have asked people in Mannheim to avoid the city's downtown area due to today's incident. Rob Schmitz, NPR News, Berlin.
A 23-year-old man pleaded guilty this morning to a mass shooting at a 4th of July parade near Chicago in 2022. 7 people were killed and more than 40 were wounded. Opening statements in his trial were to begin today. The judge has set sentencing for April 23rd. On Wall Street, the Dow is down 184 points. This is NPR News.
Good afternoon from the GBH Radio Newsroom in Boston. I'm Henry Santoro. Threats against immigrants may have led to more than half the performers dropping out of a local show. 3 storytellers dropped out of a program at the Somerville Theater yesterday afternoon called Suitcase Stories. They cited concerns about ongoing federal anti-immigrant action and rhetoric. Connie Chin is the CEO of Global Arts Live and says the show, which was centered on the immigrant experience, felt too risky for some.
We did lose a couple of storytellers who were not feeling comfortable to be on stage and draw attention to themselves.
Chin says she first performed on that stage 2 years ago and adds it's meaningful to connect with her cultural heritage and feel her stories connect with an audience.
People need to hear these stories. They need to feel the people behind all of the politics and policies that are happening and understand that we are all people together and we support each other in community.
Proceeds from the event go towards programs that help people resettle and connect with citizenship services. Well, the investigation continues after an off-duty Boston police officer shot and killed a man who was armed with a knife inside a Chick-fil-A in Copley Square on Saturday. Boston Police Commissioner Michael Cox says the officer took action after the suspect, brandishing a knife, chased two people into the Chick-fil-A restaurant on Boylston. The suspect was pronounced dead at the hospital. The officer not hurt, but he was taken to the hospital as a precaution. In sports, it's exhibition baseball still. Red Sox play the Orioles today. Sunny low 30s. We're at 27 in Boston right now. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Indeed, committed to giving job listings increased visibility with relevant candidates through its sponsored jobs feature. Learn more at Indeed.com/NPR. And the listeners who support this NPR station.
Welcome to hour number 2 of Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan. We are streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. We'll be at the Boston Public Library tomorrow with Tony Casey, John King. On Wednesday, we'll be there with special coverage of Mayor Wu's appearance before Congress in Washington and another edition of Ask the Attorney General, Andrea Campbell, from 1 to 2. And one last thing. We're now just 7 days away from Jim forcing us all to hear his thoughts on daylight saving time for the 456th time. Hello, Jim.
It's actually the 458th time.
Oh, excuse me.
But I'll continue doing it until it's year-round. By the way, just one, not correction, but addendum. When we were talking to Congressman Seth Moulton 10 minutes ago, I cited the CBS News poll saying Trump's overall jobs rating was at 51%, which is quite high. I don't know if you're listening during the NPR News. NPR did a poll. Well, I don't know if it's changed. Just a different poll taken during the same time frame, but it may have included Friday's meeting in the Oval Office. I'm not sure. If we can check that out, that'd be great. Our colleagues
because
here.
The other one did not.
Much
right?
lower. It did not.
Yeah.
So we'll see what the deal is with that. But in the interim, we're joined on Zoom by food policy analyst, multiple James Beard winner, Corby Kummer. Corby's the executive director of the Food and Society Policy Program at the Aspen Institute, senior editor at The Atlantic, and a senior lecturer at the Tufts Friedman School of Nutrition, Science, and Policy. And in a couple of minutes, we're going to be joined by a friend of his. But in the interim, hello, Corby. How are you?
Hi, Corby.
I'm your interim food commentator.
That's right.
Maybe.
I'm Marjorie.
That's the way I'd put it. Yeah, it's fair.
So, Corby, everyone is talking about the exorbitant price of eggs or not being able to get eggs at the supermarket, but there's a theory now that it's not just bird flu, but price gouging?
Price gouging. I love this story and the idea that the Federal Trade Commission under the current administration might go after some of these big cartels. So, eggs are a cartel. There's 4 or 5 really big producers of eggs, and I think 4 of the 5 are private. But the one called Cal-Maine that is public has posted, ridiculous profits. So apparently egg production is only 4% lower this year than it was last year, but the price has gone up 82%. And so, how do you explain that? Well, sounds like a cartel. It is a cartel, and they've gotten into trouble. Was it in 1989 or 1990? There was a judgment against egg companies because they were price fixing.
Well, what is happening if the production has only gone down 4%? Where are all the eggs? Where are they going? I mean, a lot of people can't get them.
Well, the companies are coming up with different ideas. They're saying demand is way up. We can't meet the demand.
Okay.
They're not actually giving plausible explanations. Prices have gone up for the maintenance of eggs. So many people have lost chicken flocks that the few productions are more expensive, although that 4% figure was really startling.
Yeah.
If the production's only 4% lower. So I didn't see many good explanations and just a lot of monopolistic behavior accusations.
Well, except there's more than an accusation. I think I'm right. Didn't the egg industry lose a lawsuit about manipulating the market and removing eggs a couple of years ago? That's one. And two, one more thing about Cal-Maine, and this is in a story, AP News, to add to that percentage thing. In the last quarter, in the middle of this shortage price explosion, Cal-Maine's profit was a mere $219 million. The quarter before, their profit was $1.2 million. A mere $18 million more. I mean, to me, that tells a lot of the story, Corby Kummer.
Oh, absolutely. The judgment didn't come down until
got you all choked up.
But the price-fixing lawsuit was brought in 2011.
No.
And so I wrote in my notes, okay, it's going to be 12 more years before we can get a judgment against these cartels.
So the FTC can do something about this, Trump's FTC?
Oh, yeah.
Well, a Democratic
maybe they've all been fired. I don't know.
Is announcing and saying, I want to look into this because this looks suspicious to me. And I thought, the Trump administration loves monopolistic practices. It seems incredible that they would go after them, except they're being so attacked, they're getting flack every day, including from Elizabeth Warren, about egg prices.
Talking to Corby Kummer.
Okay, Corby Kummer. So let's talk about these all these biologists and horticulturists and engineers. They're very expert at what they do, and they're fearing that they and more of them with unique and sometimes cases expertise is going to be gone.
So it happens that the Times found one incredibly skilled biologist who's in charge of tree stone fruits near Davis, California, 7,000 varieties. And what you hear in this story is decades worth of experience trying to get these to be more drought, these trees to be more drought resistant, to have more varieties available in case of weather-related emergencies, which is what we now call climate change, in case production really drops. And she's worried about the maintenance of this very carefully maintained seed bank. She said she had to use bubble gum and elastic bands to keep going with limited federal funds. She got fired. And what you read, and my larger point is, this is horrifying, the loss of scientific knowledge. She's a PhD, incredibly distinguished. Multiply her times thousands of people who have been fired with absolutely no forethought. Incredibly bad repercussions will come of this loss of knowledge. What really stuck out to me at the end of this New York Times story about this stone fruit tree bank near Davis, California, was the National Cattlemen's Association warning that the firing of scientists for the Meat Animal Research Center in Nebraska would gut research and cost the beef industry. Why is this so notable? National Cattlemen's Association is solidly Republican, strongly right-wing. They always have been, and that they are decrying these firings and saying, we rely on that scientific knowledge. It's being lost with this hatchet coming down. That's really something we hope the administration will read or listen to.
Well, not only are they getting rid of the scientists, as you started to say, they're getting rid of the scientific knowledge. Farmers, smaller farmers in particular, environmental groups are complaining because the USDA is taking down any reference to climate change. And this is not just a political position, from what I understand, but they're dependent upon that research and information to decide how to do what they do in the context of a climate change.
Plant in the next few months. Yeah. And they need this information to predict. It's the nation's farmers and industry whom the administration says they wish to protect.
And by the way, in a lot of these farm states, as we know, they're deeply red. And we'll see what happens with Trump's support in those places.
Free speech, free speech, free speech. Taking away the necessary speech that helps farmers plan for the next harvest does not seem to be, it's crazy.
Can we bring your friend into this conversation on Zoom now? And his friend, by the way, is going to come in with his camera off. We'll explain that in a second. This friend is legendary Washington Post food critic Tom Sietsma, the man whose career Marjorie and I almost ended in 2016. We were in Washington to broadcast during Trump's inauguration week. We were in D.C., and we came within an inch of posting Tom's photo on the website, which would have been pretty much the end. Amazingly, he is decided to rejoin us. Tom Sitzman, it's great to have you on. How are you?
I am so glad to be here. Thank you. All is forgiven.
Yeah.
I doubt that, but thank you anyway.
No, just say most is forgiven.
Most is forgiven.
Mostly
Okay,
forgiven.
most is forgiven. Well, we're all big fans here at Boston Public Radio, Tom, and one of your very just recent columns had to do with your having a meal on the 7th floor of this concrete, steel, and glass building.
Yeah.
Very bucolic views for the windows, but very secret. Tell us.
Very secret.
Yes.
Well, I got lucky. I met this young couple at a party. Turns out they were young married CIA agents. They were foodies. They said, "Have you ever eaten at our company?" And I said, "I have not. I would love to." Our company.
Yeah.
I said, "I would not. I would love to." And so this began this months-long process by which I reached out to the PR types, the CIA, to get invited there. And it was not an easy thing. They did the research on me. It was finally I got invited. I sat down with 8 people, some of whom had been former chefs there. It was great fun because the food was much better than I thought it needed to be. Certainly some of the best government issue food I've had, and I've eaten at the Pentagon. I've eaten at the White House Mess. And I thought this was really delicious, but just the way in which one gets a reservation is kind of comical because you have to be an employee of the CIA to get in, and getting in is no easy task. I had to be met outside in the parking lot, leave all my electronics, which is so hard for a reporter to do. I had to leave all these things behind. I was allowed to bring a notebook and a pen, but other than that, it was just me walking through this big complex. I felt like I was in a movie or something because everywhere you turned, I couldn't even go to the bathroom without a minder. It was one of those things. I was looking around like, oh, do I recognize anybody? It's on the 7th floor behind a door that looks a bit like a janitor's closet, right? And then you open it up and it looks like a very nice room, like a boardroom kind of situation. But what surprised me was the prices. They were totally reasonable, and the quality of the food was really good. I mean, they're making their own ice creams. They're rolling out their own pasta. They have things for people who might have dietary issues. It was as if anyone could eat there and find something to enjoy.
By the way, unlike when Tom Sitzman spent time with us in Washington at NPR headquarters, he didn't have to worry about his picture being taken, as you just heard. No electronics. And I love, Tom, you were only allowed to know the first names of chefs for obvious reasons. No credit cards, because then there's a paper trail. Cash had to be paid. Food service workers had to be citizens. It's almost like a bad movie kind of thing.
It is a bad movie. I mean, where I was, and there's no tipping either.
Yeah,
which I thought was really interesting because they're seen that the servers are seen as mission critical workers, right? and they have very short hours there too. I mean, the restaurant is only open for lunch. They do some receptions and things like that, but you can imagine not making a whole lot of money there, especially given the prices there. The entrees were about $15 to $22. I could get a very good bowl of soup for about $4. And what I loved, though, was I had these some of them undercover agents sharing their food with me. They had been apprised about how I like to eat as a critic, so they were sharing tastes and everything. But what was kind of funny was that they view this dining room as morale, good food for the troops in a way. Because it's so difficult to get on and off campus there.
Yeah.
They want to have this available for, sort of special occasions. But what I liked is that anyone who works at the CIA could book there. It wasn't exclusive to executives or anything like that. And what was also fun, I heard from several agents that people use it for like date night, but it's date lunch. They work really hard, and so they go there, and great views, good service, good food, no alcohol, no cigars, but whatever. And
this is
also
a Brad Pitt movie. You mean inter-office romances?
Well, husband and wife who work there, girlfriend, boyfriend, whatever. But what was also interesting, the day that I was there, I looked over and there was a baby. They have high chairs there, so you can bring family members there. This baby was like and said, someone at the table said, hiding in plain sight.
Baby's first name only, though, Tom. I assume you knew that.
First name only.
Yeah.
And what was really funny was my minder said, it would be really fun is to get your picture taken here. So they had a CIA photographer to take all the, we couldn't bring a Washington Post photographer in. It'd be too much with all the equipment and everything. So they had a CIA photographer assigned to me. And she goes, why don't you stand up and put a menu in front of your face and I'll take your picture. And so I did in this room full of people, most of whom were undercover, just laughing. Like, of course he has this. They had no idea who I was. I was just getting my picture taken in the agency dining room, right?
Pretty great.
Two things. How did they prevent you from tipping in cash? And did they ask to look at your notes?
They did not ask to look at my notes. I did a lot of fact checking, which was the most painful. And not because of my minder, but it was painful fact-checking in that any question I had to go through several layers of people. I mean, I couldn't even take a copy of the menu out, right? Everything is seen as having to go through like a cleansing process before it goes to a reporter or to the public.
Tom Sitzman, one of the things I thought was interesting was some of the other people who'd been there before you. Willie Nelson, great musician, but best known as like a big weed smoker. And then
Margie, he's not best known as a big weed smoker. He's one of the most famous musicians in American history.
And he's like 90 and he's going strong. So that's an example for a lot of us. And one of the many actors who played Agent 007. We don't know which actor it was.
No, they couldn't remember which one, but apparently
how could they not remember?
I know, right? It caused quite a stir when he was there.
I bet.
I do know that. And things don't go perfect either. One of the chefs who was at the table with me said, "Yeah, I remember the time, we served clams casino to a group that was kosher, right? Whoops."
Yeah.
And you can't just run out to the grocery store. It would take a full hour and a half to get in and get out. And they don't have cell phones in the building, so you have to call down. Like if something comes up with a freight elevator, you have to call back down to have it, released and everything. It's an operation. And technology, obviously they have great technology there, but because you can't use your phone, I felt like it was in like 1980 or something like that with paying by cash and all of this. But what reminded me so much of my own job was like no one was using his or her real name on the reservations.
That's incredible.
Because they couldn't be traced back to another office. And obviously credit cards would be a dead giveaway.
Before you go, I'm sorry, Corby, go ahead.
You said something in your column about how restful and wonderful it was not to have electronics to really just concentrate on the people you were with in your meal.
That was one of the best takeaways, Corby. I have to say, it was so nice. Everyone was looking each other in the eye. There was just, and it felt off to me. I think we're all so used to being overstimulated either by music or loud conversation or our phones. And there wasn't that distraction. And even though lunch is timed to be in and out in about 45 minutes, it did not feel that short because we were able to accomplish so much in a short time, not being distracted by our toys.
Tom, I know Corby's a good friend of yours, but I have to say I can see jealousy on his face. He wanted to be the first food critic to be at the CAI dining hall, but he went on open table, and when it wasn't there, he decided to give up. So that's all I can say.
It was to take you to lunch, Jim.
That's right.
Boy, but I love it. Hey, Tom, it's great to talk to you again. I'm so glad you called in. Thanks so much.
Very nice. Thank you so much for having me. Good to see you.
Great to see you.
We're thrilled to talk to him. What a great food critic he is. What a great writer Tom is.
And by the way, that story we told about Trump and all is a totally true story.
Yeah, we almost blew
Amanda McGowan, one of our people, took his photograph and he said, "What are you doing?" He's very polite. She said, we post the photographs of all of our guests on the website.
No.
Whoops. We're talking to Corby. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you for saving me. I appreciate it. Great to spend time with you this afternoon.
Yeah, thank you so much, Tom.
Great.
Appreciate it.
Bye now.
Read the piece, by the way. It's obviously in the Washington Post. It's a great piece.
It's a riot. I mean, it's not a riot, but it's fascinating because it's in the CIA dining room, which very few people are going to ever get into. So tell us, before you go, a lot of us, including myself, were absolutely thrilled to see Sullivan's in Castle Island win the James Beard American Classics Award. I didn't even know there was any such things as these, but was Sullivan's deserving, Corby Kummer?
you have not paid attention or noticed that I got Charlie Sandwich Shop at James Beard American.
I did not know that.
I didn't know that either.
I did not know that with the blueberry
it's
pancakes.
Semi-publicized that the regional judge for the James Beard Restaurant Awards is the one who's in charge of nominating, writing up, getting the restaurant to agree. I've had 2 restaurants refuse the award.
Really?
I also got Waterman's Beach in Maine to do it. They're announced before the formal ceremony, which I think is the first week of June in Chicago for the James Beard Award. There's 3 announced a year. I think there is still, we broke up the country into 11 regions by demographics, but it's only 3 a year. They rotate. So this year New England was up, and whoever is in charge of New England got Sullivan's. Yes, they completely deserve it. Why? Because they've been steady, reliable, popular, simple, unpretentious, and just served and satisfied generations of people. They're local landmarks. We rely on them. I rely on Sullivan's. It's just a wonderful place.
Hey, you said 2 turned it down? Which ones and why?
I'm not going to say who. Are you kidding?
Why?
I work for the CIA too.
Why did they turn it down?
They didn't think they could handle the publicity, and another one would not reply to our messages. They were understaffed. They wouldn't reply to phone calls. I sent people in the town I happen to know to try to go during lunch hour and say, will you do this? And they never called back. And we had to have them play ball. And, you notice the quote from the owner, the multi-generation owner of Sullivan's Castle in the Globe, Brendan Sullivan. So they have to be willing to play ball, they have to want it, and they have to return calls.
Corby, we only have about 40 seconds left, but tell people about Charlie's Sandwich Shop on Columbus Avenue, why it's such a great place.
Oh, because for generations it was a place you could go in the South End. You could see a lot of local Pols. You could see locals. You could see essentially homeless people who were semi-street people every day. Even as South End gentrified, it still had all walks of life coming in. And that's one of the great things about America's Classic. They serve every kind of person.
Didn't Obama eat there? Did you say that just now? Didn't Obama eat at Charlie's?
I didn't, but so many dignitaries and visiting people would.
I always remember the blueberry pancakes there. They were always
we got to go, but if you're free Friday night, I'm having dinner at the FBI headquarters. If you want to join me. Cash Patel.
Right.
And what's the guy's name?
He could stare at you with those weird eyes.
Dan Bongino and Corby and I.
Blogger.
Hey, Corby, it's great to see you, and thanks for help getting Tom, as always. It was great.
Corby Kummer is Executive Director of the Food and Society Policy Program at the Aspen Institute, a Senior Editor at The Atlantic, and a Senior Lecturer at the Tufts Friedman School of Nutrition Policy, Science and Policy. Corby, thanks again. Coming up after a quick break, former editor of the Boston Globe, now head of journalism at BU, Brian McGrory joins us to talk about the state of media, state of the country, Trump, Ukraine, etc. You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
What happens when a lifelong dream comes true, then slips through your fingers? Olympic gymnast Jordan Chiles knows what that feels like. She won an individual bronze medal in Paris. Just days later, it was revoked.
I felt like every single time I would accomplish something, something would be stripped away from me.
I'm Juana Summers, Jordan Chiles on her new memoir, I'm That Girl, on All Things Considered from NPR News.
Today at 4, here on GBH News 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you.
And the Hanover Theatre. International sensations, the Irish tenors, known for their classic Irish music, are bringing their timeless ballads and stirring melodies to Worcester on March 8th. Tickets at thehanovertheatre.org. And GM Roth Design Remodeling. Dreams delivered. With custom kitchens, bathrooms, and additions. Serving New England for over 39 years. Learn more at gmroth.com.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Marge Regan and Jim Browdy, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. We're back at the library tomorrow. CNN's John King and an employee from the VA who was fired by Elon Musk's Doge. Wednesday at the library, we'll bring you special coverage of Mayor Wu before Congress and Andrea Campbell is with us for Ask the AG from 1 to 2. Thursday, Peter Wolf will join us in the studio here with his fabulous new memoir called Waiting on the Moon. Friday at the library, former EPA head Gina McCarthy and former Globe and Washington Post editor Marty Barron for our new media segment. Speaking of the Globe, before we run out of time with all the programming notes, we're joined now on Zoom by Brian McGrory, also former editor of the Boylston Globe, now head of BU's journalism department. Hi, Brian.
Hello, Jim. Just trying to get my head around going from Peter Wolf to Marty Barron. That's going to be quite a week for you two.
I think so.
That's right.
By the way, the book is fabulous. This guy had a moment with every major blues and rock and roll performer ever. I mean, it's really an incredible book. Beautifully written, too.
So Brian McGrory, everybody knows about the fireworks on Friday among President Trump, J.D. Vance, the vice president, and Vladimir Zelensky, the president of Ukraine. What'd you make of that?
I mean, I make what everybody makes of it. It was unprecedented. It was potentially catastrophic. It was incredibly revealing. We saw the president's unvarnished views of his ties to Vladimir Putin and his take on Ukraine. We saw the role that J.D. Vance is playing in this administration, which is a smarmy, odious wingman. We saw, Zelensky put a pawn in the Oval Office, trying to fight for his country. I mean, it was just an extraordinary 9 minutes that it took all this to happen. It was really, really remarkable, and all the more remarkable, Marjorie. I've been in these, I was part of the White House press pool way back when, and I've been led into the Oval Office for these. Call it a spray. This was a brief press availability. They never go like this. It is always rehearsed, completely canned, right down to the minute. This was really something unlike anything that's happened in the Oval Office ever.
There's a lot of speculation.
I was going to say, was it an ambush, as people have said?
So that's an interesting question. A lot of people are pointing to the fact that Vance was there and that he's rarely there for these kinds of things, and he was obviously playing a specific role. There were a lot of people who were there. This was not just two world leaders. There were a lot of people around just off camera. I don't know if it was an ambush, if it was intended to be an ambush. The bottom line is it was an ambush, so the intentions can be put aside.
By the way, I don't know if you guys saw Saturday Night Live, but they so perfectly captured, they did a bit on this, they perfectly captured Marco Rubio sliding further and further down. For those who didn't, I'm sure everybody's seen it, Marco Rubio, Secretary of State, sitting to the left of Vance, and then after sliding into virtual oblivion on the couch, he's got to run out and praise Trump for his brilliant leadership. I mean, it is so pathetic. It's incredible.
There was one moment, guys, that I don't think has gotten any attention at all that really stuck out to me. And that was when Zelensky at one point said to Vance, you've never been to Ukraine.
Right.
And Vance started responding. He started saying, I have been. And then he stopped and said, I've read the stories and watched. And in that moment, it felt like he was sitting there wearing short pants, like a onesie. And, he's looking at this guy who has battled a world superpower for 3 years and done something that nobody expected to do, which is hold off Russia. And there's Vance saying, well, I've read the stories. And, at the end of the meeting, Zelensky goes back to his war-torn country, and Vance goes to Sugarbush to ski. And the highlight was really, the contrast was really extraordinary.
I thought you were going to say the one thing that hadn't been discussed enough was that little Trump sycophant, Marjorie Taylor Greene's boyfriend, allowed into the press pool, having the nerve to ask the question about why don't you wear a suit? Putting aside, obviously, the Elon Musk, the baseball hat, the sunglasses, the T-shirt thing, the sycophancy of just playing up to Trump because Trump was upset that he came in his war fatigues or whatever the hell. It's disgusting. Speaking of press, are they? You're not in it. You're observing and teaching and leading and whatever, are they staying up with this? I mean, I've said this 100 times. I think the fact that the other major networks and others didn't decide to boycott Trump after the AP was banned, even after the court decision saying it was okay, was a huge concession to him. How do you think they're doing in general?
It's hard to say. I mean, look, there was a letter signed by, many dozens of members of the White House Correspondents Association.
Including Newsmax and Fox News, by the way. That's how easy it was to sign. Yeah.
Exactly. And keep in mind, there was something that I forget, it's not right at my fingertips, something went awry with Fox News and the Obama administration, and there was another protest in which other news organizations came to Fox News' defense.
Well, actually, can I tell you, can I fill people in on that? Because we had Chuck Todd on the other day, and we brought that up. Obama had barred the compensation, Ken Feinberg, Fox News from a press thing with Ken Feinberg, the compensation guy, and we brought it up with Chuck, and Chuck said, I was leading the thing at NBC. NBC, CBS, ABC, and CNN all boycotted Obama, or threatened to boycott, and Obama folded in a minute. So that was a totally different reaction. Should they have done this time?
Maybe, yeah, maybe. Ken Feinberg, by the way, is from Brockton.
Right.
But, maybe. I mean, this is, again, I have a hard time faulting people for almost anything that unfolds in these situations, because there's no instruction booklet here in dealing with this administration. People are doing the best they can in real time. What we're seeing with the White House handpicking the press pool is every bit as scary. And that's why you ended up with Marjorie Taylor Greene's boyfriend yelling out, why don't you wear a suit? He never would have been in the Oval Office under the old rules. And here he was allowed in under the new rules. And that's really kind of scary.
Yeah, and I'm also thinking that if you just had these people that were total sycophants as supposed reporters in there, I mean, what might you get out of these press availabilities? I mean, somebody would have to tell the truth, and which of those groups is going to do that?
Yeah, I mean, what you'd get is exactly what Trump wants. And, just to be clear for listeners how this works, it's, stop me if you've gone through this before, but there's a White House press pool. And everywhere the president goes in any public setting, a few representatives of the big press pool are called to represent the entire press pool in these small settings. And usually you just simply alternate. There's a rotation, and the wires are always there, and there's a print representative and a network representative. And then you write a press pool report that everybody shares as if they were there. And if you're having, if the pool reports are being written by Newsmax or whoever else, it is going to be as distorted as it possibly can, let alone the kinds of questions that end up getting asked of world leaders.
Which are kind of like, President Trump, how wonderful are you today? And how brilliant is I mean, you heard some of these questions these people ask. They're just these ridiculous suck-up questions.
Yeah, and frighteningly, they're exactly the kinds of questions that President Trump wants to be asked of him, and this is not going anywhere good.
Talking to Brian McGrory, former editor of the Globe, now head of BU's journalism department. So let's come back. Well, it's not just local because she's going to Washington. What are you expecting from this? Let me rephrase it. Mayor Wu's going to Washington. We're going to bring our listeners most of at least what she has to say. I think this has potential to be a pretty pivotal moment in this race, if this race ever gets started, with Josh Kraft. Do you agree with that?
Yeah. By the way, Josh Kraft knows that the phrase is you need to run for mayor, right? You don't need to sit inside, and he knows this, right?
Can you explain this? I've been saying this in the air, and we get texts saying, oh, you're anti-Kraft. I'm not anti-Kraft at all. I like him. I think he's done great work at the Boys and Girls Club. I've never seen a major candidate announce, it was exactly a month ago tomorrow, and then essentially disappear for a month. Yeah. What's the point of announcing? What's your analysis of what the strategy is?
I don't know. I don't have a handle on it. I think, and I said this to you before, Jim, I think that having a mayoral race at this particular moment is really great for Boston. It is It is a vehicle that allows for the most important issues to be aired fully, debated. It allows for the news media to focus on the role of the incumbent, Mayor Wu, and what she's accomplished and what she hasn't. It's a really good thing for a community to have a campaign like this. But to have a campaign like this, you actually have to have a campaign. And I don't know what's going on out there yet. So I don't know. I don't know if there's a strategy. I don't know if this is just who he is. I don't know. I don't know.
But you know what's odd about this to me, and I remember interviewing him. Everybody thought he did wonderful work at the Boys and Girls Club and a wonderful guy and all that kind of stuff. But it does seem odd that a guy that's lived his whole life in Chestnut Hill parachutes into the North End and then is going to run for the mayor of Boston, and his father is associated with Donald Trump, and Kraft's new wife is on the board of the Kennedy Center.
Not Josh Kraft, Robert Kraft's new wife.
Yeah, that's right. It's I mean, because the developers are mad, I guess, because she doesn't pick up their phone fast enough, or the business leaders are mad. I don't know how many of those people even live in Boston. It seems odd timing and odd moment for a guy who doesn't live here to be doing
He lives here now, theoretically.
Well, he's lived here for since 2023. I mean, I think he did make a joke about growing up in the mean streets of Chestnut Hill, so he's got a good
And Mayor Wu's
humor.
response was, "Welcome to Boston," which I thought was a pretty good line, too.
I mean, he's worked in the city for decades, so that's great. But, it's odd timing for a Josh Kraft, a billionaire family, when we're being, someone would argue, taken over by
Hillary
billionaires
Clinton
at the
moving
federal.
to New York State, or Robert Kennedy, the real Robert Kennedy, moving to New York State to become a senator?
Well, I think that's different. They were longtime politicians who were in the game for a long time. I mean, Josh Kraft is viewed as a guy that did great things in Boston for the Boys Club. And you know what I mean? It's weird.
I didn't mean to cut you off. So I wrestle with this. And you tell me, is it a big deal to move from a close-in suburb into the city to run for the mayor's job? Is that really something that is a significant strike against you because you moved a few miles?
Well, I think when the whole package of the Kraft family and the money and Chestnut Hill and Kraft down the street and near the golf club, wherever he is in Brookline, I don't know. It's the money thing, I think, that is odd to me. Well, people that run for city council, if they run from the city council in Boston, they're Tom Menino, they're Ray Flynn. I guess you could go back to Kevin White if you wanted to see somebody.
Wait, what
that was
money
kind of
thing? When you say the money thing, what money thing? What, you can't have a lot of money and run for office? What's
no,
your
it's
point?
the whole Kraft picture of the Trump Association and the billions and billions of dollars.
Well, he's not associated with Trump. I mean, he has supported some Republicans, but he says it's because of their support for Israel.
That's right, but his name is Josh Kraft. Probably a lot of people will think he is Robert Kraft.
Maybe so.
So I don't know that we can complain for the better part of forever that we don't get enough quality candidates for mayor, and that nobody from the business community will ever step up and run for mayor as they do in other cities. And then when somebody does actually question, what are they thinking? Why are they doing this? We really want another person coming as a former state rep or a city councilor. I mean, let's be serious. I think the last thing you want is someone from the city council running for mayor.
That's not fair.
Did
There's
a
some
nice
good
job,
ones.
Brian. Come on.
Excuse me. So how about Mayor Wu? How about Ayanna Pressley? It's a new day, Brian.
Okay,
You're living in the
right.
past, okay?
Actually, it was a new day. I'm not sure it's a new day anymore, but we're getting off.
Okay, fine. So
my point is, I think Kraft has credentials, and I don't know. His money may well be an issue in this campaign, and maybe it should be an issue in this campaign. But if you look out at San Francisco and what happened there with an incredibly wealthy person taking on the incumbent, that worked out well for the challenger. So I just, I think Wu has the potential to be one of the great mayors in Boston's history, but I think a campaign will make her even better if she can rise to this occasion.
Talking to Brian McGrory. Brian, in your other life, one of the things you've told us you've done is consulting with this guy who started the Baltimore Banner down there to compete with the declining Baltimore Sun. The Banner did a series of stories which became huge national thing on this kicker for the Baltimore Ravens that is allegedly sexually assaulting people, giving him massages, and the number, I think, was originally 6, grew by another dozen. Are you involved in this thing in your...
Well, involved just in that I'm consulting with them and loosely helping out. And look, I'm intensely proud of what the Baltimore Banner is and what they've done. We've had a very wealthy individual in Maryland tried to buy the Baltimore Sun. They wouldn't sell it to him, the private equity chain that owns it. So he pledged $50 million to open up his own news organization in Maryland to prove that you can succeed at the metropolitan level in journalism. And he's built a newsroom of 85 people, 120 people in the company. And it is doing really, really well. And I think creating a template for big city news organizations across the country. And this Justin Tucker story is huge. It's huge. A great investigative trio of reporters there got onto these tips about Tucker misbehaving with massage therapists. To your point, Jim, it started at 6, it rose to 9, now it's at 16. The NFL is investigating. And this kicker is a very, very big deal in Maryland. He's sort of beloved in the community, and it's gotten a lot of attention around the country.
You know, Brian, speaking of, what's the guy's name? Bain? What's your guy's name?
Stuart Bainham.
Okay, I don't know if this is a ridiculous question. I'm sure if it is, you will make sure you tell me. What separates the billionaire owners of newspapers? You used to work for one here, who both you and Jim Dow, the editorial page editor, said does not interfere with the work of the newspaper, editorial or otherwise. The Bainhams of the world, from the Sun Xiangs, the LA Times, and the Bezoses, who decide to kowtow and get too deeply involved in their newspaper's editorial policy. Is that a reasonable question or no?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, not all billionaire owners are created equal. And we're seeing this play out really vividly around the country, with especially with Jeff Bezos. I mean, this is nothing short of pathetic what's going on at the Washington Post. I mean, it's actually tragic, and I assume you'll discuss this quite a bit with Marty Barron. Yeah. It's a unique vantage point on this when he's on Friday. The Washington Post is one of the great news organizations of the world. They did incredibly meaningful work in Trump's first term. And ever since, they have had a slow collapse, and it's been pushed even further by Bezos in many of his decisions back in the autumn, pulling the endorsement of Kamala Harris less than 2 weeks before the election, and then last week announcing that they are focusing their opinion section entirely on what he called 2 pillars, one, personal liberties, and the other, free markets. And without even a hint of irony, he said in any editorials that don't align with defending and pushing personal liberties and free markets will not be tolerated on our pages. I mean, how do you even say that with a straight face? So, I mean, you didn't ask this, Jim.
What is it?
If I were Jeff Bezos, what I would do is sell the Washington Post or put it into a trust, a nonprofit trust, endow it with a couple of $100 million to cover a couple of years of losses, get out of it so that you're not constantly antagonizing the president with your coverage. I mean, everyone says what he really cares about is Blue Origin, his rocket company, and the Post is potentially threatening that with his coverage of the administration. So get out of it, sell it or endow it and get out, and open up your own news organization, another version of the Barry Weiss news organization, the Free Press, and go after personal liberties and all of that in that organ.
Hey, Brian, speaking of your ventures, you told us a couple of months ago that you're, I don't know if I'll get this right, but I'll come close, that you're putting together essentially a student newsroom over there at BU School of Journalism. Is that happened, or is that still in the works?
It is, yeah.
What's going on there?
Really, thank you for asking this. I'm really proud of this. So we, the goal is to open up a student-driven, professionally overseen newsroom to service all the local nonprofit news organizations that are rising around the area, covering communities, towns, cities, and towns. And started with a pilot program this semester. We hired the editor of the Portland Press Herald to be the editor-in-chief of the newsroom. We have 18 kids who are all about it. Half of their class credits are being part of this newsroom. It's 5 weeks old now. We just published our 46th story this morning. We're all over the place. Newsweek has even followed us on one story.
Oh, wow.
Mr. Reporter. We just did a really sharp story about this incredibly expensive high school in Waltham, brand new, $700 million, I think, building bleachers that cover half the basketball court when they're rolled out. And kids are covering breaking news, you're covering enterprise news. So this is the first step. We want to expand from 18 kids to, we want 100 student journalists going out and fanning out around Boston and covering the region here for these local and hyper-local nonprofits. But we're off to a really good start.
And that's where you got to go now. I mean, when young people in journalism, it used to be go to a tiny paper when you get out of school, but that's all done now. Is that where they hope to go to these nonprofits? Where do you get jobs, I guess is what I'm asking.
Yeah, I mean, these nonprofits are going to be where you do get jobs, and these nonprofits are desperate for quality journalism. So what we're doing is all of the kids' work we're editing here at BU. This guy, Steve Greenlee from the Portland paper, is phenomenal. He's editing everything, working with kids. They're learning. We have a newsroom that's been donated by your counterpart, WBUR. So we're working out of there, and it's worked out really, really well. And it's giving these kids, Marjorie, as you know, you need clips, a portfolio of news clips to get a job or an internship. The irony is you need a job or an internship to get clips. So this is what's doing it for them. So they're going to be well prepared to get out into the world.
How do people access those stories if they want to read them? Is there a way?
If you live right now we have what we call 15 client news organizations, everything from, the local news sites in Belmont, Winchester, Newton, Brookline, the Dorchester Reporter, WBUR, Burlington. So if you live in a community around there, go online. You can find our work right there. And we encourage you to read these places.
Brian, before you go, can I compliment you? I don't compliment you almost at all, and I really feel I have to.
This is like the Oval Office meeting. It's unprecedented.
No, this is, not only for this BU student thing, but when you have incredibly strong opinions like you do about the mayor's race, obviously strong opinions having served as a White House correspondent for the Globe at Washington, the fact that you were able to figure out this brilliant angle on current news events, when you wrote the piece for the Globe about Herb Chambers backing the Tesla into the wall to prove was, I have to give it to you, was brilliant. Congratulations. Do you have anything to say about that or no?
I don't. People read that though.
They did.
Oh yeah.
Look at his face.
It's not, Jim, you like to be the dentist drill of journalism. You just like to come at people hard and just make them dread even seeing you.
That's right.
You have to vary it up.
It was actually a great piece. Hey, Brian, it's good to see you. It was.
I mean, did you say how many people go out on a test drive and smash the car into the parking lot wall?
I challenge readers to send me emails with their awful test drive stories.
Yeah.
Are they doing it? They are.
They are. I don't think I'm going to take it anywhere, but I do have a bunch. Yeah.
Brian, it's good to see you. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you very much,
guys.
Brian. We've been speaking with Brian McGrory, who's chair of Boston University's Journalism Department and former editor of the Boston Globe, and we thank him very much for his time. After a quick break, we've somehow managed to leave just enough time for two more things. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
Hi, I'm Gal Zipperman-Lotan, bringing you GBH Daily. When you subscribe to this newsletter, you'll get the most important news of the day right in your inbox. From trusted and investigative reporting from our GBH newsroom to local stories that start your day on a lighter note, it's all the news that matters to you in one place. You can subscribe at gbh.org/daily to get GBH Daily in your inbox each weekday. That's gbh.org/daily.
Support for our programs comes from you.
And Comcast Business, committed to providing connectivity for your business with network and cybersecurity solutions. Comcast Business, powering possibilities. Restrictions apply. To learn more, you can call or visit comcastbusiness.com. And Mass General Brigham Health Plan, ranked number 1 in member satisfaction among commercial health plans in Massachusetts by J.D. Power for the second consecutive year. Details at mgbhp.org/everyday.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. She's Marjorie Egan. I am Jim Browdy, the dentist drill of journalism. Stream at youtube.com/
That's a great line.
It is a good one. /GBH News. We're at the library tomorrow, Wednesday, and Friday.
Yeah.
It's time for 2 more things, and Marjorie will start with 1 more thing.
Okay, well, the Academy Awards were last night,
Oh, yeah.
and as the New York Times is reporting, the film that won Best Documentary Feature was called No Other Land, which chronicled these Israeli demolitions of Palestinian homes in part of the West Bank. And there were 2 filmmakers who accepted the award, and noting, they didn't know this, but I should, that this film has won a whole bunch of honors and rave reviews and now just won an Oscar, but no American distributor would pick this film up to be seen in the United States, so it's very hard to get to see it or to stream it. But anyway, the 2 filmmakers got up and gave a little acceptance speech. One was a Palestinian activist, and one was a Israeli journalist. And the Palestinian activist talked about how he just became a father, and he hoped his daughter will not have to live the same life he's lived all his life in Palestine, fearing violence, home demolitions, forced displacement from his community. And then the Israeli journalist, Yuval Abraham, got up and, he obviously talked about the need to bring back the hostages from October 7th. And but he also talked about the atrocious destruction of Gaza. He said when he looked at his fellow filmmaker, the Palestinian, what he sees is a brother who is unequal to him, that the Israeli was free under civilian law and the Palestinian was not free. He's living under military laws. He said there's a different path, a political solution without ethnic supremacy, with national rights for both people. And then he said that the foreign policy of the United States of America is helping to block this path, that neither the Palestinians nor the Israelis can be free and safe unless they are all free and safe together. It was a really moving moment and really disheartening that we won't distribute this movie here in this country.
I wonder why that is. Might displease the filmmaker-in-chief over there.
Yeah.
So Andrew Cuomo, the former governor of New York, announced he's running for mayor of New York against Trump's pal, the incumbent Eric Adams, and a bunch of other people. Now, I am not taking sides. Let me be clear about that. But Cuomo's got something, Marjorie, going for him that could assure victory. Mm-hmm. A long history of alleged sexual harassment. 11 women to be specific. While I hesitate to criticize the New York Times, but did you see what they wrote this morning? They wrote, this is a quote, Cuomo will have to convince New Yorkers that he's innocent. I would say that is wrong. I would say he's got to convince them that he's guilty. Like the found to be liable sexual assaulter-in-chief, Donald Trump. You all know about the E. Jean Carroll verdict or Justice Kavanaugh. It obviously worked for both of them. In fact, the only thing, Marjorie, Cuomo has to fear, and I've thought a lot about this, if others join the race, people like either Anthony Weiner joins the race or P. Diddy, since he's now a New York City resident, at least for a period of time. So other than those 2, I think Cuomo has got all the right stuff for 2025 in American politics.
Well,
do you believe this guy's running?
Don't forget Pete Hegseth, whose sister-in-law says his poor wife was hiding in the closet, afraid to come out because she was worried about what he might do. And other women have accused him. One accused him of basically raping her. So, it's kind of like a band. But he's got a job.
I don't think he's going to run for mayor. He's doing the secretary.
But we just want to point out it's a band of sexual harassers, and why not have one more?
Yeah, and by the way, the first polling that came out a couple of weeks ago, even before he had announced, he was crushing the field. Cuomo, 11 women accused him credibly of sexual harassment, which is why he resigned the governorship, and now he's the front runner for mayor of New York. We are doomed, let me just tell you.
Yeah, really it hasn't stopped a lot of other men, and we'll see.
It's propelled a lot of other men. How about the Tates? They have 46 trillion followers.
The Tates. I know. And supposedly the Trump administration was involved in getting them out of Romania. Do you believe that?
I know that.
Yeah.
Yes, I do.
That's good. Well, we need more sexual harassers here in the United States.
On GBH News that just wouldn't be possible without listener support. So, while you're listening, consider pitching in $10 or $20 a month as a GBH sustainer and help make it all happen. Give at gbhnews.org.
Support for GBH comes from you.
And the University of Massachusetts Amherst, ranked the #1 public university in New England by U.S. News & World Report. You can learn more about research, innovation, and economic impact for the Commonwealth at umass.edu. And The Huntington, presenting The Triumph of Love, Marivoux's beloved classic where mistaken identities, hilarious complications, and deeply felt desires collide. On stage March 7th through April 6th. huntingtontheater.org.
You're listening to 89.7 WGBH HD1 Boston. Online at gbhnews.org. GBH News. What matters to you?
I'm Jim Browdy, ahead on Hour 3 of Boston Public Radio. New polling shows America's decades-long decline in Christianity slowing, in large part thanks to a conservative shift among young white men. The Reverends Irene Monroe Emmett G.
It's Fashion Week on Boston Public Radio, and we'll open the phone and text lines to get your thoughts on pants, but mostly jeans, and everything old becoming new again. Baggy jeans, flared jeans, slacks. What makes your perfect pair of pants? It's all next on the third hour of Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Nora Rahm. More than 100 members of Congress are asking for details on DOGE action at the Federal Housing Agency, HUD. NPR's Jennifer Ludden reports the top Democrat on the House Financial Services Committee will hand-deliver a letter to HUD today.
The letter to HUD Secretary Scott Turner notes record-high housing costs and homelessness and deep concern that major downsizing by DOGE could make that worse. The signers also worry about conflicts of interest. They say 2 DOGE people at HUD come from housing-related industries that could benefit from less oversight. Among other things, the members of Congress want to know all political appointees with access to HUD records, the names of staff already let go, and a breakdown of the plan for more cuts, and a list of contracts that have been canceled or could be. Turner says in his first month, he has carried out an audit and cut waste. An agency spokesperson says HUD continues to deliver on its critical missions. Jennifer Ludden, NPR News, Washington.
Tariffs against Mexico and Canada are scheduled to go into effect tomorrow. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick said they're necessary because the U.S. neighbors have not done enough to stem the flow of illegal drugs across the borders.
Why are we building a wall when the most important trading partner to Mexico and Canada is America? They should be more respectful to us. They should be stopping caravans. And that's what the president set these tariffs about.
Lutnick was interviewed on CNN. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is back home after a busy weekend. He had a contentious meeting with President Trump at the White House Friday, then went to London, where he received a warm welcome from European leaders who are discussing how to provide long-term security for Ukraine. In his nightly address last night, Zelensky again thanked the U.S. for its support. Canada's Prime Minister is meeting with King Charles III today in England. The British monarch is Canada's ceremonial head of state, but he's been criticized in Canada for staying silent amid President Trump's threats to annex Canada. NPR's Lauren Frere reports from London.
Ahead of his meeting with the King, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau attended a European summit in London with Ukraine's president. But the questions Trudeau got from reporters were mostly about President Trump's threats to make Canada the 51st state. He responded by saying he's looking forward to sitting down with King Charles to discuss matters of importance to Canadians.
And I can tell you that nothing seems more important to Canadians right now than standing up for our sovereignty and our independence as a nation.
The monarch typically does not comment on politics, at least publicly, and he has invited Trump for a second state visit to the UK in the coming months. Lauren Frere, NPR News, London.
This is NPR News in Washington.
Good afternoon. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. U.S. Senator Elizabeth Warren has announced that she's bringing a recently fired employee of the National Science Foundation to President Trump's address to a joint session of Congress tomorrow. Doug Kowalowski of Wellesley will be her guest. He worked at the National Science Foundation for 3.5 years before being fired unexpectedly in Elon Musk's and the Department of Government Efficiency's, or DOGE's, gutting of the federal workforce. Warren says she's bringing Kowalewski to force Trump to confront the federal workers that he fired. And just a program note, GBH and NPR will carry the president's address live tomorrow night. Narratives about the LGBTQ plus community have been removed from National Park Service web pages, including for historic locations here in Massachusetts. Things like audio guides about queer and trans history have been pulled from the Boston National Historical Site and the Boston African American National Historic Site. Joan Alakua leads the History Project, a group that documents and preserves LGBTQ plus history in New England. She says the removals are a blatant instance of queer and trans erasure.
The internet both makes it a lot easier to have a lot of copies of things and also incredibly easy to erase things. And so, we can't just sit back and let this happen. GBH News is requesting comment from the National Park Service. Baseball, Red Sox play the Orioles in Fort Myers today. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from ARM, committed to delivering innovative, advanced computing designed to enable worldwide companies to unleash the capabilities and experiences of AI. The future of AI is built on ARM. ARM.com. This is NPR.
Welcome to hour number 3 of Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan. We are streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. We'll be back at the Boston Public Library in Copley Square tomorrow and Wednesday. Tomorrow, we're joined by Lee Pelton from the Boston Foundation, John King from CNN. On Wednesday, special coverage of Mayor Michelle Wu's visit to testify in Washington before Congress. And from 1 to 2, Andrea Campbell, the Attorney General, will be with us for another edition of Ask the AG. One more note, on Friday at the Boston Public Library, former Globe and Washington Post editor Marty Barron will be here to talk to us about the seeming collapse of the Washington Post, among other things. Hello again, Jim.
Also, one thing in between, on Thursday, Peter Wolf, from Jay Giles and Solo fame, has a new memoir out, I think, on March 11th, and it's spectacular, and he's going to join us to talk about it on Thursday. We're joined now by the Reverend Irene Monroe, and in person. When was the last time this happened?
I know.
Emmett G. Price III for All Rev'd Up. Who is this guy? Reverend Monroe is a syndicated religion columnist in the Boston Voice for Detour's African American Heritage Trail. Emmett G. Price III is the founding pastor of the Community of Love Christian Fellowship in Allston, the inaugural dean of Africana Studies at Berklee College of Music. Together, they host GBH's All Rev'd Up podcast, available wherever you get your podcast. Hello, you two. Good to see you.
Happy Monday.
Hi.
Emmett, you look good.
Thank you. I feel good.
So let's start with Pope Francis. He's in very, very tough shape in the hospital. There's dire fear that he may not make it. That means there could be a new pope. I know Irene is no big fan of his, and probably you neither, Emmett, but he's a lot more progressive than most of the cardinals who are really hardliners. So what could this mean, a new cardinal, a new pope for the Catholic Church? Unless they do, I won't give the spoiler alert, unless they pick like the guy that they picked in Conclave.
That's right.
I don't want to give a spoiler alert, which could really send ripples across the world. But anyway, what do you think, Emmett?
Well, this is a interesting situation. Certainly wish him the best of health and a recovery, if that is, as we say in the church, God's will. But this is also a tragedy because like most things that are happening around the world, Trumpism is happening. And Trumpism is happening within the Catholic Church, not only nationally, but writ large. And so one has to see, well, politically, will it sway the church and sway the next selection?
Yeah.
No, I don't think it'll sway the church, because I think the overarching view of the church, if we're gonna put Pope Francis as radical or progressive, very much wants to go back to a kind of traditionalist liturgy as well as church. Certainly, our prayers we're praying for for Pope Francis. And what I love about this is that just when we get these messages like, he's on an oxygen tank, he rises up again. And so, but I say this to say that prayer definitely worked, and he also feels, I think he feels this collective prayer coming from across the globe here. But I think of this in terms of, well, what kind of mess will this be like conclave? Will we have cardinal scheming? Because one of the things I learned, because the film gave you such a wonderful inside view of what goes on in electing a pope, is that you do have a swing of opinions. You will have some progressives as well as you'll have some traditionalists. So in many ways, this is where art becomes life.
I see this as a big deal because he has been unbelievably good on climate change. He's been unbelievably good on migrants. He corrected J.D. Vance. I'm not a fan of J.D. Vance. Yeah. With J.D. Vance's ridiculous interpretation, that we have these concentric circles of care and the kids are here and Ukraine is over on the other side of the moon, basically. He said, no. That's not how it works. J.D., you've only been a Catholic since 2019, so let me set you straight. And he's not been, obviously, we criticize him a lot on LGBTQ stuff and the sex abuse, but he's been so much better than what came before. And
Benedict, right.
Or Benedict or John Paul the 22nd.
Yeah.
I mean, we're going back to John the 23rd in the 60s to find someone as progressive. So I'm worried about it.
Well, can I have that?
But I'm of different thought about the Pope here. I know it's going to shock listeners as well as you here. So when you look at him juxtaposed to what we say, the litter that's out there, I think one of the problems that has been Pope Francis' problem is the problem of having two popes, two living popes here, because the legacy of the previous one still hovers. It divides the church, whether, we want to own up to it, because it creates a kind of papal authority kind of confusion, because you had folks who are very loyal to Benedict and who are literalists. And if we're saying that Pope Francis is more to the left, you could see this kind of ongoing tension because you got two living popes at the same time. And in essence, who controls the church? I'm using this as not only a metaphor, but an example. We now have two presidents, right? Who's controlling stuff? Is it Trump or is it Elon? You see the confusion.
Yeah, but I don't mean this disrespectfully, but as the only a-religious person in this foursome, starting with you, Emmett, I probably celebrate what he says on things like migration and climate more than many Catholics do. We know Vance doesn't agree with him. We know that bully tough guy, Homan, loves to talk tough, and he says he's a devout Catholic, and of course doesn't agree with the Pope. Who does, either in or out of the church, who's affected by what the Pope's positions on things are? And again, I don't mean that disrespectfully. I'm trying to picture the person or the entity that says, aha, I was going to do X, but this Pope says, no, do Y.
I think many people around the world listen to what the Pope says, even non-Catholics. I think he represents a sense and a sentiment of divinity. Whether we agree with how the order operates in the hierarchy, he's still historically, and it's almost like the Dalai Lama, regardless of who's in the seat. That seat is a very important, moral seat.
Do you agree with that, Irene?
It's a bully pulpit. So who listens to it? The church does. Because, see, what happens is that whether you're Catholic or not, or a person of no faith or many faiths or whatever, what you have here is that because of his stance on immigration, you have sanctuary cities, but you also have churches that saying, not in our worshiping body, we will do what a good Samaritan is supposed to do. So we're seeing this even in Protestant churches that, around protecting immigrants. So this is really, really good. And what it reminds me of, it has a historical, antecedent here, because it reminds me of what we call, this is true, the Lion Baptist. It was the whole idea during slavery, and the whole Underground Railroad was like, now, if if authorities who are looking for these fugitives, and they ask you, are you harboring an enslaved person? What are you supposed to do as a good Baptist? And this whole group said, we're going to be some lying Baptists. We're going to say no. So this is where a lot of times you find out that the truth is not only not appropriate, but it's not the morally right thing to do.
You know, you mentioned churches. Emmett, let me start with you. A federal judge has stayed action by the Trump administration to go into places that historically ICE and others have not gone, churches, hospitals, that sort of thing. We have heard from healthcare professionals, we've heard from education leaders that kids of undocumented families aren't going to the doctor. Right. They're not going to school. Right. Some adults aren't going because they're afraid they're going to be snatched, maybe not even going to work. Will this judge's order have an impact on those who feel safe in a church, or is it so deeply emotional that a interim court judgment doesn't matter? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. And I have two answers here. The answer that I want to lead with is that this matters, and it matters amazingly. The Quaker community, as well as a couple of Baptist communities, really filed this lawsuit, and so in that sense, it matters because the only way for people to still feel that they have their democratic rights is to be able to leverage the courts in honor of what they believe and what they believe the Constitution says. Here's the part that I don't like. It doesn't matter because so many people are afraid that we have lost our sense of accountability and lost a sense of control of what a democracy is, that even if this judge says that ICE cannot go into these churches, if ICE goes into the churches, who's going to stop them? And I think people are at that place because we've lost the ground. We've lost the bottom of what a democracy is in many ways.
How about it, Irene?
Yeah. I also want to add here that let's not forget there's also a Sikh temple that is involved in this lawsuit. And when we say cooperative Baptists, we need to be very clear. We're not talking about the Southern Baptists or any other form of Baptist. This group would fall under the rubric of the lying Baptists here. Those folks that certainly would cover for immigrants. So let me tell you how I'm seeing it. Of course, we're seeing it in terms of school, but you're also seeing it in terms of there are a couple of Venezuelans who have worked on the house here for us, afraid to go to the store, afraid to go out and have stuff like clothes packed. Should they get picked up by ICE? I asked one of the folks who had worked, on the house here to help us, undo the storage pod. The storage pod is still, unfortunately, in front of the house months later. But nonetheless, the issue is what he said to me. He said, look, I'd love to come, but listen, I'm not separating from my family. The weekends is that they don't even go out and do their walk. So he wants that if I should come, they take them all together.
Boy,
it's that kind of fear, and has asked folks like myself and others, can you pick this up for us during the week? Because they worry about the weekend, just being about in the community. Will you go to the store and pick this up, or will you go and get our prescription? It's that kind of fear. It's so palpable.
I want to emphasize. I know I've said this 100 times, but you two, I think, added something important to the discussion. So many people, when we get texts, say, well, this mass deportation thing hasn't happened. It hasn't happened yet, but the threat of it being there, obviously put yourself in this place for 1 second. Obviously, fear is so deep that, intellectually you can say, well, it hasn't happened yet, so I have nothing to worry about. Well, it may happen this afternoon. Homan, again, that tough talk, I'm coming to Boston, I'm bringing hell with me, said it again this weekend. That's scary stuff. Yeah. But
polls are out, and so they asked folks, do you think Donald Trump is doing a good job? Now, I need to say this. I have for many years, decades, said I never got to be called on anything or sent an email. And I don't know how they got it, but I was actually asked.
You were asked?
Okay, yeah. I got it through an email.
What'd you say?
Made sure. I said that I said it was unconscionable. I just went on, almost short of a dissertation. So they may have just thrown my ballot out. But what it said is that it really, these polls have some, legitimacy in reaching out to the demographic, But I also felt like, one of the things that I said in the poll here is that I hope that folks who think he's doing a good job put themselves in that person's place. And I said particularly the Christian that says you need to walk with, the dispossessed and the disinherited.
Just one quick side thing. I heard this during Henry Santoro's newscast, and our staff went and verified what he had to say. I don't know if you heard it, Irene Emmett, but that narratives about the LGBTQ plus community have been removed from National Park Service web pages, including in Massachusetts. Audio guides on queer and trans history pulled from the Boston National Historical Park site and the Boston African American National History Park site. I don't know. It's just distressing, like right here in Massachusetts.
Yeah.
Let's be clear. This is the federal government declaring that.
The federal government. That's
Massachusetts.
right.
That's correct.
Yeah, that's right. Right.
Yeah. But we're here.
It's erasure.
Yeah. But we're here.
It's erasure.
And this is the here that many were concerned about before the election, and certainly after the inauguration. We're here. So Irene is right on the money. There is an erasure going on, and it's an erasure of certain individuals. Yes. And this is the challenge. This is where prejudice, discrimination, and all those things come in, because it's certain individuals who are losing their opportunity to be seen, experienced, and honored within the historical record.
But it's every individual. No, I disagree, because I'll tell you what happened. So when they removed the T on the national park, the Stonewall Monument, my neighbor here called just inconsolable. And they said, this is about me. And I had to tell my neighbor, no, this is about all of us. Please let us always remember this, what Pastor Niemöller said during the Nazi, regime. And we all know it. When they came for the socialists, I didn't speak up. And we went down a litany list, the Jews. And then they said, when they came for me, there was no one. And I said that what we got to understand is this is about, no particular, it's about all of us. And I think that what we have to do is speak up, even if we don't align with that particular affinity group. And that's my concern. And my bigger concern is this, which breaks my heart. They're going after same-sex marriage equality. Let's just because if you can overturn Roe v. Wade, which I thought was an impossibility and was 50 years old, same-sex marriage is only 2 decades old. They're going after that, definitely.
And by the way, Justice Clarence Thomas said that in a dissent, that we should revisit a whole bunch of things, including that. And he's he's essentially the ideological leader of the court for most of the
But the problem with that, Jim, I have to say, so same-sex marriage is on Mildred Loving versus the Commonwealth of Virginia, which is throwing out anti-miscegenation laws, allowing black men to marry, interracial marriage. So my point was, I couldn't understand why he would do that, because my point is that then it would lead for getting rid of interracial marriage. But then I felt like maybe this was a divorce announcement.
Somebody wants to dump Ginny. Ginny Thomas is white, for those who don't know. I assume most people do know.
But McCormick agreed, so I just said that these boys just saying, look, baby, I love you, but now I quit you.
We're talking to the Revs, Irene Monroe and Emmett G. Price III.
Okay, there's a headline from the New York Times talking about Christianity's decline in the United States appears to have halted, but not here in New England, where the diminution continues. So is there something that makes us different in New England? I mean, it's hard to figure out what this means, frankly. But
I would think it'd be the opposite, but it's not.
Yeah, I mean, it's weird, because for the last 20, 30, 40 years, there has been a narrative that New England is the most unchristian space in the nation. And so church planters from all over the nation come to New England to open up churches. And then they find, one, there's very little real estate to build a new church. Two, there's 1,000 churches here. Most of them have between 25 to 75 people in them. And they're actually vibrant based on how church works in New England. So there's this whole perception versus perspective within Christianity. So I mean, that's part of the sub-narrative here.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, there's perception versus experience. But this is what I say. Your sort of most unchristian space really is the South. That's the most, because that's where we got that the most segregated hour in American history is 11 a.m. on Sunday here. But this is the issue. This is the very interesting thing when they talked about the decline here. They says, well, it looks like, now the growth has stopped around nuns, N-O-N-E-S. And it says, well, maybe. And then they said that the survey finds that 62% of adults in the United States describe themselves as Christians, as opposed to 40%, 2 and 3 decades ago. Well, the thing that people got to understand is that the two things, we become more pluralistic. So when you're just looking at it through a very Christian lens, you're just reinscribed the same narrative here and stuff, and not found other ways that people have gone to organize religion, as well as how there's a spinoff around spirituality that is particular to the nuns. The NONES is not devoid of spirituality. They just don't want organized religion, a litany of do's and don'ts.
Yeah, well, but the young. Did you say this, that apparently young men are the
young men are more religious? Than women,
and I couldn't.
It's all those podcasts.
Well, I was just going to say, by the way,
podcasts.
I think most people think Trump's religion is faux religion, that it's convenient but not heartfelt. Is that why? I mean, since young men are so enamored of Trump, is that where that growth comes from? That I want to be like him? I mean, I'm serious about that, by the way. Is that where it's from?
I think there is. First of all, I don't know, but I think there is a social religion that is permeating the land in terms of the ways people do family, the way people do homeschooling, the way people do some of these kind of, religious, and I'm using air quotes, practices that are not necessarily church oriented and certainly not biblically oriented and certainly not theologically founded, but they operate within the rubric of being quote unquote Christian in that lens because people want to be part of the group. People don't want to be left out.
But see, I think that what we see two things. We see a Christian man cave, that is really evolving here and stuff. And what I mean by that is that we're seeing the resurgence of what is called muscular Christianity, and can do that now, given the kind of right-wing turn that we've taken. And so the problem is that, and I need to say this about the Catholic Church here, although I've been pretty good today about them. Yeah. But in any event, here,
he's not over yet. But go ahead.
I know. But the point is, it's the man cave here. It's the and not just the conclave, but the man cave here, and that you pretty much want, clergy to be male. You want the liturgy to, in many senses, be a ritualized form of heterosexuality. So I think what you're seeing here with what, Trump is marshaling, and you're finding a disaffected group of young men trying to find ways in which, again, that they can have a kind of bonding bromance without the kind of label of am I gay, of having to make a decision about the way in which we're so polarized here. But it's problematic, because what happens with this is that you see a reformulation around Christianity that very much mimics the Ku Klux Klan back in the day. If not, this is the constitution of it.
What's the podcast deal, you two? Where are we?
We're good. We're hot.
How are we hot?
The one that's out now is about Black History. As we concluded Black History Month last week, and we talked about affirmative action, DEI, and Juneteenth, and all the things. And we listened to Irene run her mouth about, how we need to think about what's going on.
What were you doing?
I was watching.
Shocking.
But what's so wonderful? Emmett and I now have had a reprieve leave because we have left high Black Employment Month, have we not? And that's why he's able to come down.
This is exactly why I could be in person today.
That's right. Okay.
I wonder, before you go, we only have a minute left, but what do you hear in your religious communities about this really nationwide assault from the federal government on DEI stuff? I mean, I know you just mentioned, Irene, first you come for the Jews and you come for somebody else, but this is really, let's go for these people of color big time.
We're children of, I'm a child, Emmett too is a beneficiary of the civil rights movement long before. See, you go, there are two things that Black Christians will say. It's not just the government, it's not the government you serve, but it's the God you serve, okay? As well as your accountability to your community. You got to understand this. This is nothing new to Black life in America. That's it, And the audacity, I call it the hubris of Trump saying to us that he's going to cancel Black History Month as if we haven't been doing this since we got here. It's just you. Oh, and by the way, since he says it's about Identity Month, I guess Women's History Month is canceled too.
Yeah.
Hey, Marjorie, this is why I just watched, because Irene can say it all succinctly and powerfully. All I got to do is say amen.
It's just that I've been here longer. I've seen it before.
It's good to see you both. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much.
Peace out.
And by the way, the podcast is great. You can get it wherever you get your podcast. That's right. It's hot. Okay. Reverend Irene Monroe is a syndicated religion columnist and the Boston voice of Detroit's African American Heritage Trail. Emmett G. Price III is founding pastor of the Community of Love Christian Fellowship in Alston, the inaugural dean of Africana Studies at Berklee College of Music. And the podcast is the All Rev'd Up podcast, which you can get wherever you get your podcast. Okay, up next, are bell-bottom jeans having a comeback? Are tight pants having an outback? No more tight pants? We'll open the phone and text lines next. You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
I'm Arun Roth. Coming up on GBH's All Things Considered, local advocates are suing the Trump administration over its revocation of temporary protected status for immigrants from Haiti and Venezuela. Massachusetts Attorney General Andrea Campbell is rolling out new regulations to fight junk fees. And it's Music Monday. We'll hear what's on GBH jazz host Al Davis's playlist. Those stories and all the day's news starting at 4 on GBH's All Things Considered.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you.
And the Museum of Science, the heart of New England. Their giant screen production is narrated by Uzo Aduba and Mindy Kaling. You can see it now in the Mugar Omni Theater. Tickets and more information at mos.org. And VinFin, providing support services for people with mental health conditions and disabilities. Presenting the VinFin Film Festival on March 15th at GBH Studios to promote dialogue and change through films. More at vinfin.org.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Marjorie Egan and Jim Browder, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Back at the library tomorrow with Lee Pelton from the Boston Foundation, CNN's John King, and an employee from the VA who was fired by Elon Musk's Doge. On Wednesday at the library, we'll bring you coverage of what Mayor Wu has to say to the Congressional Committee in D.C. And same day, Wednesday, Andrea Campbell will join us at 1 o'clock for an hour of Ask the AG, inspired by the first Trump administration's endless infrastructure. Last week was BPR's own version. We called it Home Appliance Week. This week, it's Fashion Week here on BPR. Margaret, you might know this, not know this, but I get all my clothes, obviously, from one fashion designer, in particular, legendary Alessandro Sartori from Zegna.
Oh.
Did you know that?
No, I didn't. It would be hard to tell, Jim.
Yeah,
actually.
Thank you. He's out with some new fashion rules in this interview in the Wall Street Journal. Pants are too tight these days. If they look like leggings, he's got a problem with them. I, too, favor a more sort of retro look when it comes to pants. In fact, I think Kendrick Lamar was onto something at the Super Bowl halftime show. He's bringing back, well, they call them flare, but bell-bottoms, essentially. So we're kicking off BPR Fashion Week with pants. Baggy pants seem to be making a comeback, from jeans to big pleated office slacks. Are you or the man in your life or your office on the bell-bottom bandwagon? Are you clinging to your skinny jeans the way they're clinging to you. What is the right choice? 877-301-8970. What is the right choice, Marjorie?
Well, one of our texters says the latest trend, loose pants, tight dickies.
That's not funny. Okay, so what is it? We have boot cut, which is a variation
boot cut
on
that's
bell
in,
bottoms.
Jim. That's it. And I would like to point out that is my jean of choice, actually.
It
boot
is?
cut, Jim.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm there with the boot cuts.
How about cargo? How do you feel about cargo pants?
Well, I love cargo pants because you have so many pockets.
I hate them.
But lots of people don't like them. And
Well, you shouldn't put anything in the pockets. Would you agree with that?
No, that's why you have them. To put all sorts of things in your pockets. You wouldn't need a pocketbook if you
There
wore
is
cargo
loose
pants every
fit.
day.
How do you feel about loose fit?
Well, Jim, I don't know how I feel about
Okay,
loose
how do you
fit.
feel about ass crack exposure?
That's ridiculous. That's ridiculous.
Why
yeah,
is
you
that?
see these things in the New York Times fashion, and you think, who in the world is going to wear pants like that? Nobody. That's like the big joke about the carpenter that comes over to fix your house, or the refrigerator
It's the plumber,
repairman that comes over to
actually,
fix your
from
house.
Saturday Night Live,
the plumber,
Dan Aykroyd.
whatever it is, and they bend over and you can see the top of their butt crack.
How about dad jeans, like on Barack Obama, one of the coolest people ever lived?
Called mom jeans.
How horrible did he look in those?
He looked horrible.
Horrible.
And
by
mom
the way,
jeans are tough.
Should there be an age limit on men
Lots of
in
people
blue
think
jeans?
so. Lots of people think so.
I think so too.
But speaking of baggy jeans, we have a little
Please.
sound from the great '90s rom-com, The Teen Clueless, about baggy pants and in what people think about baggy pants. Here's some sound from Clueless.
I don't want to be a traitor to my generation and all, but I don't get how guys dress today. I mean, come on. It looks like they just fell out of bed and put on some baggy pants and take their greasy hair, and cover it up with a backwards cap, and we're expected to swoon? I don't think so.
I don't think so. 877-301-8970. What are your pants of choice? And why? I guess is
What
the
are
beginning
yours, Jim?
of
I
Fashion
told
Week.
you mine was boot cut.
I like really skinny jeans where everything. No, I mean I like relaxed. I don't like feeling trapped in my clothing, so I don't like wearing like a tent kind of thing. Because then people think you're just doing it because you're trying to cover up the fact that you are expanding as we speak. I sort of like a loose, comfortable kind of pant.
Do they make jeans with elastic waist?
Oh, my God. By the way, I want to tell you something. I knew you'd say it. By the way, I knew you said that. I have never, I want to repeat, never worn elastic waistbands.
Oh, my God.
Well, on bathing suits, but nothing short
I'll
of
repeat
that.
for the 50th time the great line from Diane White, who was a longtime columnist of the Boston Globe, said, elastic waists are the first sign of
giving up. That was great. That was great. Wasn't that sweatpants?
I don't know. Well, sweatpants do have elastic waists.
They do.
But they're good if you're going to go to a buffet and you really want to stuff yourself. You know what I mean?
And let me just say again, the cargo pant look, as far as I'm concerned, if you put things in the pockets, you destroy the whole, it looks like you have protrusions from different, I mean, really, don't you feel like that? Do you remember when Marty Walsh wore, when he was mayor, he wore cargo pants at some parade, and cargo shorts.
Yeah.
And he took a lot of heat. But do you remember why he took heat? All the pockets were full of crap, and they were bulging out. So that's not the
he didn't
solution.
want to have to carry a pocketbook, so that's why he stuffed everything in his pockets.
Okay.
Okay, here's some text. I'm so happy skinny jeans are going out of style. They look absolutely ridiculous on straight men over the age of 30, that is. We should all have jumpsuits, flares belts.
I love jumpsuits.
Hats, and NPR belt bags, or fanny packs as we call them
Yeah.
here. I'm so short, I'm just happy if I find jeans I don't have to roll up 17 times.
That's very sad. Is anybody talking about the ass crack jeans, or are they not?
No
doing
one is
that?
talking about that.
You've
but
seen
people
those,
talk a
have
lot
you
about
not?
Dickies. Dickies are big.
Okay, fine. We're not talking about Dickies today. That's another Fashion Week thing, but we're not talking about today.
People can't stop talking
Oh my
about Dickies.
God. Okay,
and
but you
tickets
can't
to the
stop talking
Boston
about
Public
Dickies.
Library, because so many people do 2025 is the year of Dickies and whale pants.
You know, by the way, you know what I wish I had? Speaking of whale pants, which I've
What?
never worn, even though Marjorie wrote in a column in the Herald that I did before we really knew each other.
Yeah.
You know, I have to say, I know I'm going to be ridiculed for this. You know what I looked really good in when I was
What,
a lot
Jim?
younger?
What?
Bell bottoms. I have to say, I had,
really?
and I had the almost Sly Stone kind of width at the bottom of the
That's
bell
right.
bottoms.
We look at you and we think Sly Stone right away. That's what we think. Wow.
That's because I want to take you higher. If you Google that, what?
I want to take you higher.
Thank
Robert
you.
Downey Jr. at the Oscars was apparently wearing bell bottoms.
He
Did
was?
you know that? Well,
I
that's
missed
what one of the
that.
texters
Last
says.
night?
Yeah.
Okay, fine. 877-301 897. You want to comment on any of the fashion at the Oscars before we start taking calls? Halle Berry had the most incredible dress I've ever seen.
She did.
I
didn't see the red carpet. I missed it.
No, she was when she was presenting an award.
Oh, I missed that too. I
Yeah.
guess. Yeah, she's gorgeous.
So it wasn't because she was so. I knew you'd say
What'd she
that.
wear?
It's so
What'd she wear?
superficial. It's like a million either broken mirrors all stitched together, and I don't maybe I didn't, but it was really spectacular. It was great. Okay, 877-301-8970. I don't know why we're doing this since Marjorie would not even take a position. I have taken a position on this issue, and we would like you to as well. Bob, you're in Vermont. You're on Boston Public Radio. We're talking about pants as we kick off Fashion Week here at Boston Public Radio. Hi there.
Hello.
Hello.
Yeah, I don't think skinny pants are going anywhere. I sell clothes online. I sell a lot of skinny jeans.
You do?
I think, I had, at least 20 orders go out over the weekend. The cargo pants thing, I think, only makes sense when you're using the pockets. If you don't have a tape measure or a putty knife or a screwdriver, get rid of them. No good.
Now, Bob, how did you end up selling pants online? Was it they're falling off a truck up there in Vermont, or what's the deal?
I source different auction sites. I go to different charities and whatnot and pick up. I do trade sales. There's quite a bit of a used market around here.
So essentially,
who's buying, Bob? Who's buying the skinny jeans? Is it younger people or is it older people as well?
A lot of my online sales, I can't really tell.
You can't tell. Okay.
I do see. I don't know how to put this. Ethnic names, and I think they're the ones that are really looking for bargains. I think they're, tough economic places you search online before you go to outlets or wholesalers.
Yeah, let me just tell you, I don't have an ethnic name, and I'm always looking for a bargain. So I'll check you out. Hey there, Bob, good luck with the business. We appreciate your call. 877-301-8970 is the number. By the way, you didn't respond. You've responded to nothing in this discussion.
I did. I said
Let's hear it. And how about Barack Obama? The coolest man who's ever been in the Oval Office.
Horrible.
Marjorie doesn't remember this, but she will.
I do.
When you go visit a leader like a president or a prime minister, you have to dress sort of like he or she does. So there was a great moment. We talked about this on the air. When George W. Bush was president, he was down on the ranch. And he was, and I have to say, I'm not a huge fan of W's.
He looked good in his jeans.
He looked good in jeans and a
Big
jeans
Texas
jacket.
Belt buckle.
And the Speaker of the House, I can't remember who it was, and the Senate President was Trent Lott from Mississippi.
Trent Lott.
And they
So
both
embarrassing.
obviously bought. They didn't wear. They bought and then wore jeans and a jeans jacket. And Trent Lott was in brand new blue jeans that had creases down the middle, and a jacket that clearly just came off the rack.
A jean jacket.
It was just.
He looked ridiculous.
He looked ridiculous.
Yeah, he looked ridiculous.
And so did Barack Obama for again
the mom jeans. Yeah,
is that what they're called, mom jeans?
Mom jeans. Well, here's a mom who says, my teenage daughter wears jeans that look nice in the waist and tushy, but are very wide-legged. As her middle-aged mom, I wear the requisite high-waisted, tapered look. I think a lot of that's why they call them mom jeans. They're kind of not a little bit baggy, and they're probably not that sexy looking.
Okay, let's go to Linda in a car.
Somebody else says they wear tactical pants.
What are they?
I don't know. Idea.
Was it like a camouflage thing or something?
I don't know. Camouflage, maybe.
Linda in a car. You're next on the Pants Hour here on Boston Public Radio. Welcome to the show. Hi.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Sure.
So I actually, I'm a 51-year-old college student, and I actually went to school today in palazzo pants.
Ooh.
I love a big wide pant. I have for a long time. There's a place for a skinny jean. There's a place for a wide pant. I think fashion is so subjective, and and also revolving. So in 15 years, these pants might be out of style. They might not be out of style. I know in 15 years, if they become vintage or retro, they'll have a $150 price tag added to whatever I already paid for them. So it really depends on the person. If you're 80 years old and you can carry a mini skirt or, and you can carry skinny jeans and a heel, do it. I don't think there's really any rules to fashion. Now, except for men. If you're a man.
Yeah, if you're a man.
After a certain age, 30, skinny jeans, the ripped jeans, the multicolored jeans. No. It just has no.
What's the age where you should stop showing your crack to your fellow citizens, with Linda? What's the age for men?
Once you've learned to potty yourself.
Hey, Linda, before you go away, you said you're 51 and you're in college. What's going on there?
So I am a student at UMass Boston. I know you guys sometimes go over there to do
love the place, yeah.
Your radio show. I'm actually looking forward to hopefully seeing you. I missed you last year, but I'm hoping to be able to see you all this year there. I am a psychology major, and I have a double minor. And I'm hoping to go from undergrad into either a PhD program or a PhD program.
That's great, Linda. You. Congratulations on that. Good luck with it. Call us again. Thanks. We hope to get back to UMass Boston soon.
Here's something that I haven't really considered.
What's that?
Whatever jean shape is in fashion, I hope we can bring back jeans with no Lycra. I live in Eastern Mass, hot and humid. Lycra clings like a hot, slimy film.
I'm sorry, I should know this. What is
the stuff's a huge aggravation. I hate how the jeans with Lycra creep down, constantly forces me to wear a belt. Yuck.
What is Lycra
I guess that's
again?
I think that's what makes them stretchy. Is that what makes them stretchy, the Lycra? I thought it was the spandex that made them stretchy, but I could be wrong.
Well, you could be wrong.
Someone wants elastic pants and Velcro shoes to bring them back.
Yeah, they're really huge.
Oh, and somebody else says...
When were Velcro shoes big, Marjorie?
I think Velcro shoes are huge now. Kids don't know how to tie their shoes
Velcro.
anymore.
You mean like instead of tying them? I thought you made men out of Velcro.
Yes.
Okay, fine.
And somebody also texted, I can't find it now, but the LL Bean makes a secret elastic waist pant.
So people don't know?
So people won't know that you're wearing elastic waist. Yeah.
Really?
Very
I
sneaky.
think they'll know probably when you're like exploding above the top of the pants. That's almost a dead giveaway. 877-301-8970.
Here's somebody quoting Christopher Muther's assessment of the Oscar fashion last night.
I didn't see it. What did he say?
He says Timothée Chalamet's baggy suit last night. Could any other actor have shown up at the Oscars, the glitziest, most glam night of the award season, in a butter yellow look by Givenchy and pulled it off? Yes, definitely. But the idea of the suit seemed to fit Chalamet. I say it, Chalamet. Right? Chalamet. Sorry, the suit not quite a tux, baggy, ill-fitting, but custom-made for the complete unknown actor. That got nothing last night. Did it get anything at all?
Nothing. In fact, it was nominated, I think, for 8 awards, and it won 0.
A lot of them didn't get that much.
Did you see who presented the Best Song Award last night?
Mick
Jagger walks out on the stage.
He was great. His little introductory talk was perfect.
He made a joke about Bob Dylan and not wanting to come because the only good songs were in the movie with his songs. And then he wanted to say, so Dylan suggested somebody younger, and so they picked me. So what is he, 80? I think.
I don't know.
Is Jagger 80? Marjorie and I saw him. A friend took us a couple of months ago at the turns 82, John says.
Yeah, he looked great.
How good did he look at 82?
He looked great.
And how well did he move at 81 at
he danced like for 2 hours.
Gillette.
Was it Gillette? He danced like for 2 hours. And his reading the room, he was just really good. It was just right. Not too long, not too short. I mean, Adrian Brody, that won for The Brutalist, went on and on and on.
Stop the music.
Started playing. He said, stop the music. I
think if you win Best Actor, you can do whatever the hell you want.
Oh, I don't think so.
One of our colleagues looked it up,
If a woman
Marjorie.
did that, Jim, we'd never hear the end of it.
That's right. It wasn't a woman. Lycra is a brand name. I'm kidding, by the way. Don't send text. Lycra is a brand name for elastane, one of our colleagues says, which is highly elastic synthetic fabric. Despite having different names, Lycra, spandex, and elastane are all the same material. Fabrics can stretch 5 to 8 times their usual size. Can I just say something about my clothing, which you ridicule every day on the air?
And what?
I never let, I'm not saying it's not ridiculable. It probably is. But I would like to say the following proudly. To my knowledge, I never have a non-natural fiber touch my skin. What do you think of that?
I think Lycra's in all these pants now.
I don't. No, it's not.
Isn't
not my pants.
Natural.
I'm not wearing
fiber?
polyester. I'm not wearing elastane. I'm not wearing any of that stuff.
Well, Jim, that's wonderful.
Thank you.
100% cotton and linen kind of guy.
I'm a cotton and wool and linen kind of guy.
That's good.
That's good.
Actress Daryl Hannah apparently had wide flare bell bottoms on last night.
She's 6 feet tall, you know.
She's 6 feet tall?
Yeah, she's also partnered with Neil Young. Did you know that?
I did know that. Yeah. Not anymore, though.
I saw them backstage. Oh, they're not? Farm Aid a few years ago.
Maybe I'm wrong. I didn't know they were still together. Maybe they are.
They're still.
Okay.
John says they're still together, which means they're obviously still together.
Okay.
Ian in Hyannisport. Marjorie apologizes for making you wait like an hour
Sorry,
to get
Ian.
through. Hi, Ian. Welcome.
Hello.
Hello to you.
So what I wanted to mention was I'm now in my mid-70s, but back in the mid-1960s, in school we had what amounted to competitions for how tight your white Levi's could get.
How'd you do?
And I did fairly well, but one of my classmates quite correctly said, I don't want them to just see my sex, I want them to see my religion too.
Think about that for a while, everybody. That's a pretty good one, Ian.
Thanks, Ian. That was a good one.
Thank you for sharing that with us. We appreciate it. 877-301-8970.
John from Lowell says the only people who would benefit from the return of bell-bottoms are those who have cankles.
Yeah. Well, don't say. I know what you're going to say. Don't say it. It's not kind.
I'm going to say that was a terrible description.
Yeah, of a particular person. And
yes,
let's
Chris
not
Matthews.
say it. It's not really nice.
We're not going to say it.
Well, you
Okay.
said it. I mean, you obviously said it. What do you mean you're not going
I
to say
said
it? You said it
cankles.
already.
Okay.
No, I know, but you said who almost, well, you pretty much said it's about.
Guy from Winthrop says, just model the president. He's a fashion plate. I've never
can we
I've never
discuss
seen
that
Trump
for a
in
minute?
jeans. Have you ever seen Trump in jeans?
No,
no.
but
I
I'd
did
like
see
to
him in
say
a short
this.
little tennis outfit.
Yeah, you look very fetching in that tennis outfit. Can I say this about that? I told you many years ago, I like cashmere jackets, and not only because they're soft, but they look really good on television when I was doing a television show. So I told you this, when they were on sale at a particular place in Boston, I bought like 8 of them. I mean, really on a big sale. And I just wore them until they wore out kind of thing. Trump obviously has a number of the exact same blue suits, but 9 times out of 10, this is a billionaire, wears the exact same looking blue suit that is too big and the exact same red tie that goes below his crotch. What do you think that's about?
I don't know.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
What's in his head, I have no
Thank
idea.
you. Excellent
Listen
commentary,
to this.
yes.
15 years ago, I had a band called the Alston Pants singing songs about skinny jeans. I guess we won't be reuniting anytime soon.
Gil in Essex, you were next on Boston Public Radio. Thanks for your patience. Hi.
Hey there, Marjorie and Jim. You are on the phone with Nancy, my mom, and Gilly.
Oh, hi.
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 Nancy's in her 80s, and I'm in my 40s, and we go to exercise class together.
Love it.
And we wear each other's spandex pants. And I just wanted to remind you that that clothing has no gender. So the people that say, oh, if you're a male or if you're straight or if you're this or if you're that, you can and can't wear this. That is not that. I just want to remind people that it's not a hard and fast rule. You can wear whatever you want, and you can still be a straight man wearing whatever you want.
It's
wild.
Hey, do you have a photograph of the two of you or no?
Oh my God, tons.
Could you send us one? I'm serious.
Okay, fine.
BPR at G. Is it WGBH or at WGB? Even though there's no more W anymore.
Probably.
Wait. BPR@WGBH.org. I'd love to see the two of you going to gym together.
You bet. Absolutely. Well, we go to classes at the senior center. Everyone should go to their exercise classes at their local senior center.
Say hi to Nancy. You were great, Gilly. Thanks. Call us again. Both of you, call us again soon. We appreciate it. 877-301-8970.
You know, did you watch the red carpet event last night?
I was out to dinner.
Oh, because they usually have these. Years ago, they would have Joan Rivers and her daughter would be commenting on all the outfits.
Is she dead or something?
Remember that?
I think she's
I don't
dead.
know.
Yeah.
But it's definitely not.
She's dead. Thank you,
not
John.
on
Again.
anymore.
Wait, why are you bringing this up?
Because somebody texted about it. Gone are the days when Joan Rivers would be there commenting on all the food.
Well, there was
the outfits.
there was a red carpet thing right before at 6:30.
Someone is congratulating you, Jim, on your allegiance to natural fibers.
Well, by the way, it's not even an environmental thing. I'd like to say it is. It just doesn't it feel better on your skin? Do you like polyester rubbing against your skin?
And a lot of people think that you're supporting more American-made stuff too. If you're not doing the cheap stuff, you know, the disposable shopping things.
Yeah.
I'm embarrassed to say I spent a lot of time buying disposable clothes for my children. I shouldn't have done that, but it's too late now. When they were young, I did. go to Old Navy. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's something.
Not
a real commitment to the environment, you know?
I know. It was terrible. I'm trying to make up for my bad choices.
Okay, good.
Okay, let's go to Richard from Boston. Hi,
Hello, Richard in Boston. Hello. We're talking pants
Hello.
here.
Good afternoon.
And to you.
And I am, and can only speak for men, of a certain age. I'm decades beyond my 30s.
Okay.
And if I can use the euphemism, I'm big boned.
Got it.
So wearing tight pants is when I see somebody, even if they're younger, a guy who's just big and wearing tight pants.
I'm with you.
You know, inner tube with a moose knuckle. It's not attractive. It's not attractive.
Okay,
You know, lose weight or accept the fact that some kid is going to scream, "Mommy, what is it?" You know?
That was a hell of a call there, Richard. Thank you.
Do you want to play a little sound from Seinfeld about Kramer and his really, really tight pants?
More trouble. Yeah, please.
Okay. Nobody. This introduction says nobody wears tight pants like Kramer. So here is a clip from Seinfeld when Jerry guilts his neighbor into wearing a pair of slim fit jeans.
You know, when I first met you, Kramer, you used to wear jeans all the time. Yeah, well, I was a different man then. With a different body. Hey, I got the body of a taut, preteen Swedish boy. Jerry, you gotta help me. What's wrong? I can't get my pants off. All right. I undo them. I'll help you get them off. I already did. They won't come off. Okay, you just gotta wiggle your hips a little bit. Hold that. Squinch your hips in. I am squinching my hips. Squinching them.
Marjorie is like the happiest she's ever been. Let's have it. Do you remember that from the show?
I remember it. I remember it was a very funny scene. Poor Kramer couldn't get his pants off.
Well, whatever.
Oh, Daryl Hannah's still married to Neil Young, says a texter. So I didn't even know that.
I saw them when I was at Farm Aid a couple of years ago. Backstage was Daryl Hannah with Neil Young and Meg Ryan in her long relationship with John Mellencamp. I said it to you off the air, and when we're talking off the air, most people don't get to hear it except the two of us. So I figured I'd repeat it. You know what I mean?
Oh, Joan Rivers is no longer with us, Jim.
She is?
The texter says she
Who's
died
she with?
after having plastic surgery a while ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can I tell you, who's the best dressed person we work with?
Jared Bowen.
So who better to ask about what are the appropriate pants in 2025?
What do you think? Bell bottoms are back. Tight jeans are out.
Yeah.
What do you think?
What do you
They're
think,
not
Jared?
totally out. It's whatever you can pull off. So whatever your style is.
It is whatever you can pull off. Body shape is a big thing.
Exactly. So I think that they just put something funny in my ear. That's why I just hesitated.
What were you about to say? Something good about Timothy Chalamet's suit?
Yeah. I thought he
love
looked
that suit.
This is what I think is fascinating. I think the way that men's fashion is evolving all of a sudden is really, really great. It's really graceful. It's really elegant. And the men looked great like last night, like Coleman Domingo and Jeremy Strong, Timothy Chalamet.
Jeremy
definitely.
Strong. He always stands out. Was it the Golden Globes or wherever it was? He had that wild outfit on last time.
Was he a leprechaun or he was dressed like a leprechaun or something? Wasn't he?
I don't know. It was very different.
Well, that was the Dunkin' ad, maybe. He emerged from the...
No, that was in the coffee beans. Whatever. Okay,
Yeah.
what did we say? What did we ask him something here?
We're talking about tight pants, and
pants.
you said it depends on how you're built, and that's a very good point.
Is that what you said?
Certain people
I
look
did
good in
say
tight
that.
pants, and certain people do
fine.
not.
Okay.
They're not
right?
totally
Certain
again,
people
gone.
should go with the mom jeans, and certain people should not.
Okay, fine.
Well,
So
I'm not
certain
sure
people-
anybody should go with the mom jeans.
Probably nobody should.
There's
go
a way
with mom
around
jeans.
that.
What is the way around
What
it?
is the way around it?
More
wear
graceful
jeans.
baggy pants.
Yeah, I'm
because that's
with
the
you, by
problem.
the way.
They have the pleats, and then they come back together at the cuff, and then it looks like you're wearing pantaloons or something.
That is an excellent point, Jared. What are you doing on your show today?
So we're going to be talking to Joyce Cole-Haywick. We're continuing your Oscars conversation.
Oh, good.
By talking to Joyce Cole-Haywick with a full Oscars recap, and then from there we'll go to former NATO Supreme Allied Commander Admiral James Stavridis.
Oh, great.
Who, of course, spends a lot of time considering global affairs, but he also does it through the prism of his books and novels and kind of past his prologue mentality with him as he looks at how we've arrived here and where we may be going.
Wow. Is he at Tufts? Is that where he is?
He was at Tufts, no longer. Yeah, he was at the Fletcher School for a while.
Right, Fletcher
And then we're going to talk to the president of the Boston Society for Architecture, because you may remember that on day one of his presidency, President Trump issued an executive mandate
Banning architecture.
Mandating that all new government buildings adhere to classical architecture standards.
God.
So we'll talk about the ramifications of
why
that.
does he leave people alone, for God's sake?
Okay.
Trump Tower, I wouldn't argue that's
trending? What's interesting? What's going on around town? We're talking all things arts and culture on The Culture Show, next on GBH 89.7.
Funding for our programs comes from you.
And Emerson Colonial Theater, with a Broadway production of Jason Robert Brown and Alfred Urie's musical Parade, coming to Boston for 2 weeks, this March 11th through March 23rd. Tickets at emersoncolonialtheater.com. Brit Floyd is back, fresh from their 2024 Division Bell World Tour. We have their stunning concert performance and tickets to their next show in Boston. It's time for Brit Floyd, Pulse, tonight at 9 on GBH2.
You're listening to 89.7 WGBH HD1 Boston. Online at gbhnews.org.